Chapter 946. Guixinqing, who was lying on the roof of a tall building, had a fierce look in his eyes. Then he gestured to Li Qingsong on the other side to launch an attack. Before seeing whether Luan Xiaoyu was dead or alive, the operation had to continue. Especially before leaving behind the bodies of the Southern Ming agents, they couldn't retreat. A sharp whistle sounded, indicating the start of the attack. Immediately, nearly 100 men dressed in black walked out from the nearby houses and corners. They moved forward quickly like ghosts, heading straight for the luxurious carriage in the middle of the road. The 30 carriage guards kept retreating until they couldn't retreat any further. Then they pulled out their weapons and got into a defensive stance. The eyes of nearly 100 assassins were red. They only had one goal, and that was the woman in the carriage. As long as they killed this woman, they would have made a great contribution. Then they could return to the Southern Ming Empire to receive their rewards. This was their only hope to start afresh and become a righteous person again. They had to grab hold of this opportunity. With 100 people fighting against 36 people, the advantage was very obvious. After just one exchange, the assassins in black had the upper hand. 2 of the assassins in black even bypassed the guards and came to the front of the carriage. They reached out and pulled the curtain. Shwa! A white light flashed, and the arm that had just reached out suddenly flew up. A figure rushed out from the carriage. Who else could it be but Tianhu? 2 blades flashed quickly, and the assassins in black fell to the ground one after another. Not a single one of them was a match for them. At the same time, teams of cavalry appeared on both sides of the street and surrounded the area. Not good retreat. Seeing that this was clearly a trap, the assassins in black stopped attacking and turned to retreat. They wanted to use the surrounding buildings to escape. The 36 guards who had been resisting all this time suddenly had a Type 95 submachine gun in their hands. A series of gunshots rang out. One after another, the black-clothed assassins fell to the ground. The sound of gunshots indicated that they had lost the ability to escape. Let's go. Seeing that the ambush was actually a trap, Guixinqing and Li Qingsong, who were on the roof, also turned to leave. Although they had fallen into a trap this time, they had completed more than half of their mission. They had successfully shifted the blame to the Southern Ming Empire. However, at this time it was not so easy for the 2 of them to leave. Their movements had long been watched by the Wolf Fang Special Forces. When they were about to leave, more than a dozen shadows also followed them. Originally, there were many residences here, so it would be difficult to find the 2 of them. It was Li Qingsong's fault for blowing a whistle when he gave the order to attack. Wolf Fang happened to catch it. Then he found Guixinqing through Li Qingsong's hand gesture. Since they had been discovered, there was no way they could escape. Guixinqing and Li Qingsong, who were retreating immediately, realized that someone was following them. This made them extremely shocked. They could not understand how they had been discovered when they had been so careful. However, now was not the time to pursue these matters. Escaping was the problem that needed to be considered. Li Qingsong was very unlucky. In the process of escaping, he rushed straight toward another member of the Wolf Fang Special Forces and was blocked. Seeing that the road ahead was blocked, he gritted his teeth and jumped down from the roof that was more than 30 feet high. Watch. Feeling that his ankle was twisted, Li Qingsong immediately took a deep breath. He rolled on the ground and got up. He supported his broken leg and continued to leave. Then, when he stood up and looked up, 2 members of the Wolf Fang Special Forces appeared in front and behind him. They looked at him as if they were looking at a monkey being played. Their eyes were full of mockery. Enduring the pain from his ankle, Li Qingsong's hands reached for his waist. 2 short knives appeared in his hands. He shouted and rushed toward the 2 members of the Wolf Fang Special Forces in front of him. Ever since he joined the Imperial Secret Service, he was already extraordinary. This was where his confidence came from. Usually, 6 or 7 people would not be able to get close to him. Even if he was injured now, it should not be a problem for him to fight against 4 people. Li Qingsong, who was confident, rushed forward. The 2 short knives were fierce and powerful. He slashed diagonally. Every move he made was a killing move. It was as if he would kill anyone who dared to block him. Li Qingsong was desperate enough. His face was full of murderous intent. The 2 short knives were also very sharp. However, he did not know that his opponents were the best members of the Wolf Fang Special Forces, Silver Hand and Steel Leg. Facing the rushing Li Qingsong and the 2 short knives that were shining with silver light, the 2 of them were not afraid. Instead, they laughed and let him get close to them. However, they did not show the slightest intention to retreat. It was not until the short knives were in front of them that they stretched out one hand and one leg. They grabbed the back of the 2 knives with both hands and kicked Li Qingsong's chest. With a powerful force, a figure was kicked out. Even in the midst of frantically retreating, Li Qingsong's face still had an unconcealable fear. He thought that he was already very powerful, but he did not know that there was always someone stronger. Compared to the more elite Wolf Fang special forces, the gap between them was still very big. Under Li Qingsong's carelessness, or it could be said that his strength was not equal, he was caught red-handed. In contrast, Guixincheng's luck was much better. He was not surrounded when he was escaping. Instead, he escaped from danger. When he landed in a small courtyard that had already been prepared, he changed into the clothes that had already been prepared here. Then he pretended that nothing had happened and walked to the street. Reality told Guixincheng that the 5-star army had obviously come prepared. Once they could not find him, he was afraid that they would immediately search for him. The small courtyard he was in was certainly not safe. Now, only by walking out of Seoul could he be considered to be really out of danger. Guixincheng, who had a beard on his face and changed into silk clothes, came to the street. Unfortunately, he found that there were soldiers of the 5-star army everywhere. They had actually blocked all the streets in this area. Anyone who entered or left had to be strictly checked. Guixincheng reached out and touched the travel pass that he had already prepared. He wanted to try to rush out, but his calm personality made him stop the impulse in his heart. He did not know if the travel pass that he had bought from the North Korean official was useful. If there was a problem, then he would be walking into a trap. He looked to his left and right, and when he saw a large mansion, he suddenly made a decision. He would hide there for a while. He didn't believe that the 5 astral army would be able to seal off the streets forever. As long as the situation was not as tense, it would be time for him to escape. Guixincheng's face was as calm as possible. He left the crowd without attracting any attention and went straight to the courtyard with the word Li written on it. When he arrived at the foot of the courtyard wall, he didn't immediately jump over the wall. Instead, he first listened to see if there were any movements in the courtyard. After confirming that it was safe, he grabbed onto the 2-meter-tall courtyard wall with both hands and jumped over the wall to enter. Generally, in this kind of large courtyard, there would always be some places that no one went to. If he was lucky, he could find a place where no one would go to hide. No one would be able to find him. But it seemed that Guixincheng's luck wasn't too good. When he jumped over the wall, he saw a young girl with a pretty good status. That girl was also looking at him at that moment. For a moment, their eyes met, and both of them had surprised expressions in their eyes. Then the girl wanted to shout after being frightened. But before she could make a sound, she felt a pain in her neck. Then her vision turned black and she fainted. Guixincheng finally made his move. He also clearly saw the surrounding environment. It turned out to be a small garden. Judging from the building in front of him, it should be a courtyard that belonged to a young girl's boudoir. It was obvious that the girl from before was sitting here thinking about something. Perhaps she was too engrossed in her thoughts, so she didn't make any movements, causing Guixincheng to misjudge. Fortunately, the girl was knocked unconscious at the first moment and did not expose herself. Next, he only needed to avoid the initial investigation and then he could find an opportunity to leave. Carrying the girl in his arms, he walked towards the room in the courtyard where the door was already opened. This would become Guixincheng's temporary shelter. Overall, his luck was not bad. With this young lady around, eating and drinking was naturally not a problem. The premise was that she fully cooperated with him. Guixincheng was not worried about whether the girl would cooperate with him. So many years of experience told him that the more wealthy and noble a person was, the more afraid they would be of death. Under his threat, wouldn't she do whatever he wanted her to do? But how could Guixincheng know that this girl was not just anyone but Li Jinju? Previously, she was in a daze in the small courtyard because she was at a loss about her future. Han Chang was already dead. It was said that Tian, who had also been reprimanded by the Duke of Loyalty. Now he was still imprisoned. Then what was she? What if Tian, who felt that she was unlucky because of this matter and did not want her in the future? Compared to other girls, she might have the right to choose. Because of her, one person was killed and the other was imprisoned. She would inevitably be regarded as an ominous woman by others. She had no more choice. It seemed that blessings did not come in pairs and misfortunes did not come singly. If a person was unlucky, even drinking cold water could be stuck between their teeth. While he was in the courtyard, he actually encountered a criminal. Could this be his fate? After a while, Li Jinju slowly woke up. Her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at Guixincheng, who was standing in front of her with a dagger in his hand. Li Jinju woke up. Guixincheng showed a kind face as much as possible and said, "I am not a bad person. I just offended some enemies. They want to deal with me, so I temporarily hid here. Please rest assured that once the danger is over, I will leave. As long as you cooperate and don't yell, I will not hurt you. How about it? Chapter 947. Seeing that Guixinqing wasn't a lecher and was even so amiable, Li Jinzhu wasn't as nervous as before and nodded. Then the white cloth covering her mouth was removed. All right, I'm going to let you go now. But if you dare to scream, then the white knife will enter and the red knife will come out. It's a pity that you're so beautiful and yet you're going to die. Wouldn't that be a pity? Li Jinzhu nodded her head twice. Seeing how cooperative Li Jinzhu was, Guixinqing smiled. Very good. Next I have a request. Before I leave, you can only stay in this room. If I discover any movement from you, I guarantee that within a few steps, my knife will fly out and take your life. Do you understand? I understand. Li Jinzhu nodded her head obediently. Very good, I believe you're a smart person. Guixinqing laughed again. Then he walked to the small table at the side and casually drank the tea placed there. At this moment, it was as if the well water didn't interfere with the river water and the well water didn't interfere with the river water. They were only waiting for the danger to pass before going their separate ways. It was as if they had never met before. On the streets outside the Li residence, the investigation was still ongoing. The main focus was on middle-aged men. As long as it was someone like this, no matter what identity they had, they would be taken away for screening. Just from this point alone, Guixinqing was right not to rashly walk out. More than 2 hours had passed since the search began, but there was still no result. Wolf Fang Captain Tai who led his men to search the area and finally found the courtyard where Guixinqing was staying. They also found the clothes that Guixinqing was wearing. This should be one of his strongholds. The surrounding streets have been tightly sealed off. It's impossible for him to leave. How about this? Inform all the troops to search from house to house. In short, we must find him. Tai who looked at the clothes that Guixinqing had thrown away and said angrily. The target actually escaped from under his nose. This was a great humiliation. If he still couldn't find him, how could he face the sixth young master? Therefore, no matter what price he had to pay, he had to find him. After the streets were sealed off, the search began. The Cold Vanguard Regiment of the nearby Sea's 4th Division had been transferred over to guard the perimeter. The Wolf Fang Special Forces and the 1st Cavalry Division became the main force in the house-to-house search. Finally, the two tigers met and launched a joint operation. Coincidentally, Tian Hu and Tai Hu had met at the entrance of the Li family's courtyard. This place was very close to the street and it was also a big house with many rooms. It would be very easy to hide a person here. When the two tigers appeared at the entrance of the Li residence with several subordinates, the two nodded in greeting. One was an infantryman while the other was a cavalry. One was a regular combat unit while the other was on a special mission. This made it very difficult for both sides to work together. But now they actually bumped into each other. It must be said that it was a kind of fate. Captain Tai, after you. Teacher Tian is too polite. This is Li Minheo's residence, right? You should go first. After a round of politeness, it was Tian who raised his arm and knocked on the door. After all, everyone knew that he and Li Minheo's daughter seemed to get along very well. After all, they would be family in the future. Things like knocking on the door, he could do it. If someone else did it, it would be equivalent to not giving Tian Hu face. Tai Hu was a very good person, so he gave up the opportunity. After a round of knocking, the door of the Li residence opened. As the master of the house, Li Minheo came out with a group of servants. Teacher Tian? Li Minheo didn't know what was going on outside, but with the idea that it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble, he stayed in the house and prohibited others from entering or leaving. When he suddenly heard someone knocking on the door, he was a little unhappy. He thought that someone was targeting the Li family. But when he opened the door and saw that the leader was Tian Hu, the anger on his face suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a smile. Oh, I didn't know that Teacher Tian would come. Sorry for not coming out to meet you. Li Minheo was very polite. He spoke very fluent Chinese. It could be seen that he was an official who was heavily influenced by Sinology and Confucianism. Sir Li, I'm sorry. There are thieves nearby. We need to search from house to house. Oh, by the way, this is Captain Tai Hu. A slap does not hit a smiling face. Moreover, Li Minheo was Li Jinzhu's father, so he spoke very politely. Oh, so it's Captain Tai. It's an honor to meet you. Li Minheo was a smart person. After listening to Tian Hu's introduction, he knew that Tai Hu's identity was not simple. While he was smiling, he also tried to raise the other party's identity as much as possible. Sir Li is too polite. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's just that we have official business to attend to. We'll have a good chat with Sir Lee next time. I don't know if we can do a check now. Tai, who also had a smile on his face. He gave enough face to Tianhu. Otherwise there would be no need to be polite. With the military order they could just go in and check directly. Of course. Generals and brothers, this way please. Li Minhao smiled and stepped aside to let them pass. If it were someone else he would be more or less unhappy. However, the leader was Tianhu, so he didn't feel any reluctance. Under Li Minhao's lead, everyone entered the Li family's courtyard. Then the brothers he brought with him started to search. Everyone knew that Tianhu was related to Li Minhao. Therefore, even though they were searching, they were very careful and didn't damage a single blade of grass or tree. After about half an hour, the soldiers returned to the main courtyard. The news they brought with them was that they didn't find anything suspicious. Tianhu nodded with satisfaction. Then he looked at Taihu. Since the Li family was related to him, it was better for him to not make some decisions. He didn't want others to say that he was covering for them. Taihu also smiled at Tianhu. Then he asked the team members he brought with him, "Are you sure you've checked everything? There's no problem?" "Yes, there's no problem. Only Miss Li Jinju's courtyard is left unchecked," the team members reported. Then their faces showed some embarrassment. In the eyes of the soldiers, there was no difference between men and women. Since they were searching, of course they couldn't let go of any place. However, who was Li Jinju? After everything was done, she would become Division Commander Tianhu's concubine. How could such a woman be treated the same? Therefore no one broke into her courtyard and no one dared to check it. Tai, who looked at Tianhu with an embarrassed expression. "Division Commander Tian, what do you think about this?" "It's okay. I'll go with Master Li to take a look." Tianhu naturally understood that this was Iron Tiger giving him face. He immediately accepted the mission and then looked at Li Minhao, who was beside him. Li Jinju was still a member of the Li family. It wasn't appropriate for him to meet her in private. "Oh, no problem. I'll accompany Division Commander Tian to take a look at my daughter. It just so happens that she's not in a good mood recently. I'll have to trouble Division Commander Tian to comfort her." Li Minhao keenly felt that this was an opportunity. How could he let go of an opportunity to get together with his daughter and Tianhu? "Thank you." Tianhu expressed his gratitude to Li Minhao. Then he looked at Taihu and said, "Captain Tai, why don't we go together? I'll introduce Miss Li to you." Tianhu didn't want to mix public and private matters. If it turned out that the fugitive was in Li Jinju's room and he didn't see it, then he wouldn't be able to explain himself even if he had 100 mouths. Although the possibility of this happening was less than 1 in 10,000, it was better to avoid trouble. Originally, Taihu didn't want to go in and take a look. There were still many places to check. However, if he rejected Tianhu's invitation, it would seem that he wasn't open and above board. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he nodded. "Okay, since that's the case, I'll go and see Miss Li. It'll be considered as a greeting." It was a great honor to have the dignified commander of the Cold Vanguard Special Forces greet someone. Without a doubt, this machine was for Tianhu. It was also a way to express goodwill. "Okay, let's go together." Li Minhao still had a smile on his face. Although he didn't want Division Commander Tai to accompany him, since everyone had the same idea, he naturally couldn't object. Thus, the three of them strode toward Li Jinju's small courtyard. This time they didn't bring anyone else. 1 or 2 people were enough to check. In the small courtyard, when the sound of footsteps came from outside the door, Guixinqing, who was resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. Then he looked at Li Jinju, who was still trembling with fear, and gestured at the dagger in his hand. Li Jinju's entire body tensed up. Her face revealed a shocked expression as she nodded lightly. She believed that if she didn't do as this person said, the dagger that scared her would stab her body at any time. The footsteps outside the door were getting closer and closer. Li Minhao's voice could also be heard clearly. "Division Commander Tian, Division Commander Tai, this is my daughter's boudoir. I don't know why the door is closed in the middle of the day. The weather isn't too cold right now." Seeing that the small courtyard's door was closed, Li Minhao smiled awkwardly and prepared to continue forward. "Wait." Taihu, who was beside him, promptly stopped Li Minhao and asked, "Sir Li, you said that Miss Li's door is usually open during the day?" "Oh, it's October now. The weather in the morning and afternoon is still very warm. Usually it's open except for cloudy and rainy days," Li Minhao instinctively explained. After saying this, he seemed to have suddenly thought of something. His whole body couldn't help but tremble. Then, his body went limp and was about to fall to the ground. Chapter 948. Fortunately, Tianhu reacted quickly and reached out to steady him. Then he gently shook his head. Captain Tai is just suspicious. Perhaps there is no problem. Good, it's best if there is no problem. Li Minhao quickly returned to normal. After all, he had led soldiers before and had some courage. However, it was because this matter involved his daughter. Coincidentally, his daughter was the hope of the Li family. This caused him to lose his composure. At this time, Tianhu had already turned his head and looked at Taihu. Captain Tai, are you sure there is a problem here? I'm not sure, but we have to guard against abnormalities. How about this? We will stand on the left and right of the door and wait for official Li to open the door. Then we will rush in. However, I don't know if Teacher Tian will have any problems with this kind of close combat. At this time, Taihu had no time to call his team members outside. If he left now and the person he was looking for was really in the room, he would definitely be alerted. Therefore, the next step would depend on him and Tianhu. I have no problem with close combat. Tianhu nodded. He was not originally a cavalryman. He only learned it later, so close combat was not a problem for him. Good, then we will need official Li's cooperation. Don't worry, Teacher Tian and I are here, so there won't be any problems. In a while you just need to act like normal. Taihu saw that Tianhu was so confident and his heart was set. Then his gaze fell on Li Minhao. In this short time, Li Minhao had also returned to normal. This matter involved the safety of his daughter and the future hope of the Li family. He also had to calm down. Okay, I know what to do. Don't worry. After the three of them had a preliminary understanding, they returned to the boudoir. In the room, Guoxinqing was listening attentively to something. Just a moment ago there was no sound outside, which made him suspicious. Now the sound outside was heard again and it was Li Minhao's voice. Hihi, this is my daughter's room. She usually likes to be quiet, so the mansion actually gave her such a courtyard. Now that the door is closed, she must be afraid that she is not feeling well. Let me ask her. In his words, Li Minhao had already revealed his identity. Guoxinqing, who was in the room, did not doubt him. Instead, he looked at Li Jinju, who could not stop her nervousness, and said, "It should be your father. Tell her that she is sick and has already laid down. When she gets better she will go and pay her respects." Yes. Li Jinju didn't dare to question him, so she nodded in response. Then she raised her head, suppressed her fear, and said aloud, "Father, your daughter is unwell and has already fallen asleep. How about this, when I'm better, I'll pay my respects to you." "Oh, where's my daughter feeling unwell? She was fine when we had breakfast this morning." The voice outside the door was getting closer and closer. Then, before Guoxinqing could teach Li Jinju what to say, the door had been pushed open from the outside, and a ray of sunlight naturally shone in. It was also at this time that the door suddenly opened, and two figures flew in from the left and right. One of them fell in front of Guoxinqing, who was holding a dagger. The sudden change caught Guoxinqing off guard. He only thought that the person who came was the owner of this place and only brought 2 servants. He didn't think that the person who came was so skilled and moved so quickly. In a hurry, he instinctively dodged the attack and stabbed the dagger at Li Jinju's body. The dagger stabbed out and went straight to Li Jinju's waist. This scene made Li Jinju couldn't help but scream. Then she felt her body become light, and then a tall and burly body blocked in front of her, facing the dagger. Sensing a familiar aura, Li Jinju instinctively hugged the figure tightly. Then the sound of weapons clashing could be heard. A cavalry saber and a short saber clashed. At the last moment, the saber blocked the other party's attack and knocked it to the side. Needless to say, the person who saved Li Jinju was Tianhu. At the critical moment he took out his second dagger and saved Li Jinju's life. When he stretched out his dagger, he also took the opportunity to take a few steps back and sent Li Jinju to a safe place. Then he loosened his hand and put her down. He said to Li Minhao, who was still looking at this scene in surprise, "Look after her." After he finished speaking, Tianhu had already rushed out with his dagger. His target was Guoxinqing, who was fighting with Taihu. Guoxinqing, who was once an elite of the great Ming Dynasty's genie guards and had few opponents, was in a crisis at this moment. The martial arts he was most proud of had become the most useless at this moment. When he faced the captain of the special forces, Taihu, he found that no matter how he struggled, he seemed to always be at a disadvantage. His speed, strength, and flexibility were all inferior. When Guoxinqing first fought with Taihu, he felt a strong pressure. He retreated step by step. In the blink of an eye, he had already retreated 4 steps. Seeing that the wall behind him was not far away, his forehead was covered with layers of sweat. Swish! Another swift blade flashed over, brushing past his arm and slicing off a layer of flesh. Blood dripped down and pain assaulted his entire body, causing Guixincheng's movements to involuntarily slow down. This created an opportunity for Iron Tiger. Taking advantage of the moment when Guixincheng's retreating speed slowed down, Iron Tiger swept Guixincheng to the ground with a long leg sweep. When his body fell to the ground, Guixincheng instinctively wanted to jump up like a carp or a sparrowhawk. However, an extremely sharp thin knife was already placed on his neck. He had a feeling that if he dared to move again, his head would definitely be separated from his body. Guixincheng was captured alive. Facing the joint attack of Tai Hu and Tian Hu, no one in the 5-star army could defeat them except for Yang Qindong. After Tai Hu removed Guixincheng's chin to prevent him from biting his tongue, he carried Guixincheng as if he was carrying a chicken. He smiled and turned around to leave. He had a feeling that this person's identity was definitely not simple. Perhaps he could get more details from him. Tian Hu did not leave immediately. Seeing that Li Jinzhu was frightened, he wanted to stay and comfort her. "Don't worry, the bad guy has been caught. No one will threaten you in the future. It was just a dream just now." Okay. Li Jinzhu, who had calmed down, temporarily forgot her fear. She looked at Tian Hu and asked, "You didn't kill Han Chang, right?" "Of course not. Xiong Kai must have something to do with that person just now. You can rest assured that with the 6th young master here, it won't take long for the truth to come out." Tian Hu showed a rare smile. Not only him but probably all the people in Yangxia thought of Yang Qindong as an omnipotent existence. The so-called conspiracy in front of the 6th young master could only be seen through. Guixincheng was captured and so was Li Qingsong. When the two were taken to the dungeon in Seoul, the captured assassins quickly identified the two as their leaders. In this regard, the two had no intention to refute. They not only admitted it frankly, but also revealed their hidden identities. They only asked for a quick death. Tai Hu, who was in charge of the interrogation, came to the palace after getting the confession. After seeing Yang Qindong, he gave a detailed report. Yang Qindong listened quietly, but after Tai Hu finished, he shook his head. "They said they were sent by Yingzong to deal with me?" "Yes. As for their identities, we have already sent a report to the headquarters of the Security Bureau. The Beiming Security Bureau branch will soon send a report to us. At that time, everything will come to light." Tai Hu revealed a naive expression as he spoke. Everything seemed reasonable and their identities shouldn't be fake. However, Yang Qindong still felt that there was something fishy about this matter. Ever since he was almost assassinated in Beiming's capital, he ordered the southern Ming merchants to adjust the price of goods. Because of this matter, all of the southern Ming merchants were very dissatisfied. Of course, they didn't dare to do anything to Yang Qindong, the god of wealth. Therefore, they quickly targeted the southern Ming imperial court. Because of this matter, the southern Ming Empire had already sent people several times to express goodwill and apologize. They expressed that the previous matter was a misunderstanding and hoped to have a good talk with the 5-star army. After all, Yang Qindong was still the great Ming Empire's loyal duke, so he couldn't be considered an outsider. However, Yang Qindong didn't have any intention of forgiving them. Under such circumstances, how could the southern Ming Empire still send people to deal with him? Even if they wanted to deal with him, they should have found an opportunity to kill him in one blow. Even if they succeeded, they would only anger him. What good would that do for the southern Ming Empire? He couldn't figure it out. Yang Qindong had a feeling that there must be a secret behind this unrewarding matter. Looking at Tai Hu, Yang Qindong said in a gentle tone, "Captain Tai, you must have worked hard. How about this? Let's leave the interrogation of Guixincheng and Li Qingsong to Beta Persei. 6th young master, you don't trust us?" Tai Hu frowned and there was a hint of urgency in his voice. "It's not that I don't trust you. It's just that I have some thoughts. I always thought that things wouldn't be so simple. How about this? Let's continue the interrogation. You guys will be the assistants and Beta Persei will be the leader. You guys should also learn from his methods." Yang Qindong didn't want to dampen the enthusiasm of Tai Hu and the others, so he said this. I say, old Tai, you guys are very good at carrying out special missions. However, when it comes to interrogations, you guys are still too inexperienced. Aha. Let me teach you guys this time, 2nd Yang, who was standing beside them, said casually. He had learned a lot about interrogation skills from Yang Qindong. Now that he had the chance to show them, he was naturally proud. Beta Persei, who had received the order, went to the dungeon and called Guixincheng and Li Qingsong together. "Listen, you two. You didn't tell the truth before, so give us a chance now. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll be begging me to tell you." There was no torture, only persuasion. Tai Hu and the others who were ready to learn widened their eyes. If the other party could answer the questions just by talking nicely, wouldn't that be too ridiculous? Chapter 949. Fortunately, Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong did not have the slightest intention of changing their words in the face of the grinning Beta Persei. They still insisted that they were members of the Southern Ming Dynasty's brocade guard and that they had already said what they needed to say. If they did not believe it, they could check it out. Well, you're refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, hee. Come on, bring them to 2 separate rooms. I want to see how hard their bones are. The smile on Beta Persei's face began to fade, and his voice became much colder. The 2 men were turned on and off separately. Beta Persei still had no intention of torturing them. He just asked people to keep an eye on the 2 men at all times, and then he kept hitting the gong to give them the greatest auditory stimulation. He also instructed that the gong should not stop until the other party was ready to speak again. Every quarter of an hour, a different person would strike the bell. Such a simple arrangement fell into Tai Hu's eyes. He asked with a puzzled expression, "Is that all? You'll know if it works or not when you try it?" Beta Persei laughed and turned to leave. It seemed that torture was not necessary, but this kind of visual stimulation was fatal. Perhaps the 2 men could bear it for a short period of time, but after a long time, they would not even be able to sleep. It would not take long for them to have a psychological breakdown. When that time came, they would not dare to lie. The case of Han Chang's murder was closed. The matter was done by the Southern Ming Dynasty. Guo Xinqing, Li Qingsong, and the others' complaints were posted at the entrance of the North Korean provincial government. As the provincial governor, Zhang Yi, in order to appease Han Chang's father, Han Zhao, he specially hired him to work in the new government and gave him a certain amount of power. Politics was not about fighting and killing. The beauty of politics was in compromise. Han Zhao was arranged to work in the new government. This was a signal that the 5-star army would not exclude the local forces of North Korea. As long as they made contributions, they would receive corresponding rewards. With this move, in addition to Yeshin's hiring of more than a dozen North Korean officials, stabilizing food prices, redistributing land, allowing more people to have their own land, opening trade routes, preparing to build factories, starting to recruit workers, and a series of other policies, the situation in North Korea became stable again. At this moment, Luan Xiaoyu stood up again and added fuel to the fire. She took out more than 40 marriage applications and completed the initial marriage of the 5-star army officers, cadres, and the local forces of North Korea. With each marriage, the situation became more stable. In the palace, after Governor Zhang Yi reported his work, he listened to Yang Qindong's instructions. Governor Zhang, distributing land and opening trade routes are only one aspect of it. You have to find the most suitable path according to your own characteristics. For example, North Korea is surrounded by the sea on 3 sides. This is a major characteristic. You should think of something to do with the sea. You are also an old man from Kaegung City. You should know about the canned food factory there. You can think of a way to ask your old mayor to think of a way to borrow some elites to build a factory in North Korea. As long as you have your own factory, there will be a way to sell your products. That is the same as having the freshest bloodline. Only then will you be able to ensure that North Korea's finances will not be affected. This way, you will be able to calm the people and create enough wealth to do what you want to do. Yes. 6th young master is right. This official will immediately contact the mayor and ask him to support us no matter what. Zhang Yi nodded repeatedly. His eyes were filled with excitement. And the canfish factory can be built. With the technology and the products are up to standard, you can consider promoting it to other places to sell. I believe that the brother provinces will support you. However, you must remember that you must not fish in a pond. You must have a plan and targeted development for the sea. You must not overdo the fishing. When the time is right, you can also consider artificially getting some fish seedlings and scattering them into the sea. Otherwise, our generation will be able to eat the capital, but the future generations will suffer. Also, you must think of a way to deal with the sewage from the factory in advance. You must ensure that the water quality of the sea is not a problem. Yang Qindong brought out some of the development experiences of the future one by one. There was no such thing as industrial pollution in the current world, but if it was not protected, it was only a matter of time before the destruction of nature occurred. Since he could make the decision, of course he had to shake off some of the defensive measures in advance. Zhang Ye's small notebook was full of things. After learning from the experience, he left with satisfaction. Beta Persei entered the hall and reported, "Young Master Tai Hu is here. Please." Yang Qindong took a sip of tea. It had been 6 days since Guixinqing and Li Qingsong were arrested. There should be some results there. Tai Hu appeared for this matter. He thought that Beta Persei's idea was not much. Wasn't it just torturing people so that they could not sleep? In the past, when they were completing missions, there were times when they could not sleep for 2 days, so they did not think much of it. However, they did not expect that while they could endure it for 2 or 3 days, 5 or 6 days was not something that ordinary people could endure. On the 6th day, Guixinqing and Li Qingsong, who had lost a lot of weight from the torture, spoke separately. They weren't afraid of death, but this feeling of being neither alive nor dead was too unbearable. Rather than forcing themselves to endure, they might as well tell him everything. Even if they were to die, they could still ask for a quick release, right? Tai Hu wrote a new confession and gave it to Beta Persei. Beta Persei sent it to the dragon table in front of Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong looked at the two people's new confessions. They all pointed to Prince Nanming Zhu who ate one. They said that the two people had been bribed by Prince Nanming. This time they took action to frame the southern Ming imperial court. Compared to the previous confessions, this result was much more reasonable. Tai Hu's heart was finally at ease. The matter was finally done. His mission was completed successfully. He did not let down the 6th young master's expectations. This monarch Nanming really has a good plan. Yang Qindong chuckled, then put away the confession. Then he looked at Tai Hu and asked, "Tell me, what do you think after receiving this confession?" This was clearly a test. It was also a chance for him to perform. After being stunned for a moment, Tai Hu's mind spun quickly. After about 5 or 6 breaths he finally raised his head. "6th young master, this subordinate thinks that Prince Nanming is not enough to be feared. We don't need to take any revenge." "Tell me about it," Yang Qindong asked with interest. After receiving encouragement, Tai Hu's face flushed red. He continued, "6th young master, Prince Nanming's current situation is not good. He is being besieged by the southern Ming imperial court and Prince Shiping from both sides. He is already at a disadvantage. If this continues, it is only a matter of time before he is destroyed. It doesn't matter whether we intervene or not. Moreover, you said that now is the time to consolidate the fruits of victory. It is not the right time to be enemies with the great Ming Empire. Since that is the case, it is better to use this opportunity to develop our own strength. Isn't it better to sit back and watch the tigers fight?" Good. Tai Hu, you are looking at things from the perspective of the big picture. Not bad, not bad. You already have the ability to take charge of one side. Very good, very good. Yang Qindong laughed. He was very satisfied with Tai Hu's answer. Tai Hu, who was praised, smiled. He was also in a very good mood. Next, something that made him even happier was yet to come. Tai Hu, the current scale of the special forces is still a little too small. The role they can play on the battlefield is also very limited. I think it is time to expand the army. Let's make a regiment with 5 battalions and 2,000 soldiers. As for your rank, you should also be promoted. Let's make you a senior colonel. What do you think? Are you confident? Most regimental commanders were usually given the rank of colonel. Some junior regimental commanders were even given the rank of lieutenant colonel. But now that Yang Qindong allowed him to be given the rank of senior colonel, it was obvious that he was being promoted. It also meant that his status had been promoted. In the future, when he faced some of the teachers, he would be able to speak with his chest out. Yes. Tai Hu replied excitedly. Thank you, 6th young master. Please rest assured, 6th young master, the special forces will not let you down. Good. Remember, now that we have the scale, we also need to increase our combat power. Write a report on how much money you need. I, young master, will personally approve it. Tai Hu left excitedly. Yang Qindong, who was left behind, was not very excited. The expansion of the special forces, the Ghost Sniper team, and the Eagle Brigade was originally part of his plan. In the past, his strength was limited, so he couldn't invest too much in these special forces. But now it was different. The entire army of the Yang faction added up to about 200,000 to 300,000 people. According to the ratio, these special military forces would need to be expanded. The main hall was silent. Yang Qindong was writing something on the table. It was about the matters after the incident between Guixinqing and Li Qingsong. According to Yang Qindong, he was almost schemed against, so he had to give an explanation. Although it was as Tai Hu said, he didn't have the intention to send out troops. But he was not allowed to complain about it. Therefore, Yang Qindong personally wrote a letter to the Emperor of Southern Ming Zhu Qizhen. The general content was that the Imperial Secret Service under your command tried to assassinate me. After the matter was exposed, they were arrested. Although they said that they were sent by you, I didn't believe it. After interrogation, it was proven that they were Imperial Secret Service members who were bribed by King Nanming. This was clearly King Nanming's plan to kill two birds with one stone. In the end, it was proven that I had almost wronged the emperor. Let's talk things out and let bygones be bygones. It could be said that most of the contents of the letter indicated one thing. The Duke of Loyal and Daring believed that Ing Zong would not harm him. They were still good friends. However, these were just pleasantries. The most important thing was that Yang Qindong wrote that Ing Zong reclaiming the southwest was part of his duty. As an outsider, he couldn't interfere. Therefore, the southern Ming could only take revenge themselves. As for what he could do, since he couldn't send out troops, he could only provide food. However, food didn't come from the wind. It was the hard work of the people of Vietnam and Laos. However, in order to support Ing Zong in reclaiming the southern Ming and defeating King Nanming, they were willing to sell a portion of the food. As for the specific price, he could discuss it with the officials of the two provinces. Chapter 950. In the end, the key point of this letter was to sell grain. After Laos and Vietnam became Yang Xie's territory, the land was redistributed to the people. Because of the loans provided by Yang Xie's bank, many people had their own fields and cattle. With the help of chickens and eggs, coupled with good weather, the grain production for more than 2 years had risen steadily. Now, not only were some granaries full of grain, but the second season's harvest was also about to arrive. The governor of Laos province, Luan Shaochen, and the governor of Vietnam province, Song Zhe, sent a telegram to ask if they could sell some of the excess grain in exchange for money, and at the same time, stimulate the enthusiasm of the people to farm. Previously, King Nanming's forces and the southern Ming imperial court had sent people to contact the two provinces, mainly to discuss the issue of buying grain. Unlike Yang Xie, these two forces were vigorously sending out military equipment. In addition, no one knew when the war would start. Even if there were grain fields, no one was willing to plant them. Over time, the grain problem began to give them a headache. After knowing that Yang Xie's provinces had grain, they wanted to buy some back in case of a rainy day. However, Yang Qindong did not agree at that time. After all, the grain from these two provinces was used to supply the grasslands. But now, North Korea had become Yang Xie's territory. It was also a large agricultural country. With the geographical advantage, they could buy grain from the grasslands in the future. This reduced the pressure on Vietnam and Laos, and the matter of selling grain finally slowed down. After the letter was finished, Yang Qindong personally sealed it after checking it. Then he called Beta Persei and asked someone to send the letter to Emperor Ingzong. Only then did Yang Qindong let out a long sigh. At the same time, he leaned back on the throne and narrowed his eyes. In the eyes of others, he was preparing to sell grain because he had a lot of grain. However, only he knew that he had a deeper and bigger plan, which was to strengthen the trust of the southern Ming Empire. In order to meet this requirement, Yang Qindong was not prepared to sell grain at a high price. As long as the people and the government could make money, they would be satisfied. Looking at the southern Ming Empire, once they realized that the amount of money used to buy grain was not high, and it was even more cost-effective than if they planted their own grain, they would naturally reduce the amount of grain they planted. Like this, if there was a day when he and the southern Ming Empire turned the tables, he would only need to cut off the grain export chess piece to throw the southern Ming Empire into chaos, and the opportunity would naturally present itself. Great Ming, although I admire your backbone and courage, but the weak are prey to the strong. Facts have already proven that you are heading towards decline. Since this is the case, for the sake of the Han people, I will replace you. Yang Qindong muttered in his heart as he slowly closed his eyes and breathed evenly. In the 10th month of 1454 AD, Korea became another province under Yang Xie's control. This vassal state of the Great Ming Dynasty no longer needed to look up to the Great Ming Dynasty. Regarding this, there were many different voices in Bai Ming's court, and there were many curses. While Dai Zong and Zhu Qiu were having a headache, Yang Qindong helped them in their hour of need. At the price of 120 taels of silver per warhorse, he loaned 50,000 warhorses to Bai Ming, which was 6 million taels of silver. Adding on the 5 million taels of silver that he had previously loaned them, the total was 11 million taels of silver. As the saying goes, money is king. After these 50,000 warhorses were sent from Shur City to Talu City, the different voices in Bai Ming's court quickly disappeared. With these warhorses, Bai Ming finally made a decision. After the new year, they would send troops to the grasslands and eliminate the threat of the Wara in the west. Although there were still 3 months because they were using too many troops, and because this was the first time Baiming's Daizong Zhu had taken the initiative to go to war, the momentum was great, and the preparation time was naturally very long. According to the information sent by the intelligence department in Baiming's capital, this time Baiming would attack the Wara from two different directions. The first legion was led by Yang Hong with a total of 200,000 troops, of which 50,000 cavalry and 150,000 infantry, including 10,000 firearms units and 100 cannons, heading towards the Hetao region from Datong Prefecture. The second regiment was led by the Xian Mansion's chief soldier Shi Wanshan, with a total of 200,000 troops, of which 50,000 were cavalry and 150,000 infantry, including 10,000 firearms and 100 cannons, advancing from Sambar to Jingzhou in the Shaojing region. After the Tumu Castle incident, the Great Ming Dynasty was divided into North and South. Baiming and Southern Ming finally revealed their fangs, each looking for their own goal, and started to prove their existence and realize their so-called great ambitions. At the beginning of December 1454 AD, Leng Feng and Wu Sheng, who had lost contact for 2 years, finally sent back news. The political commissar of the three divisions, Qin Bo, personally returned to the grasslands Shiqing. When the news reached the ears of Yang Qindong, who was still helping Zhang Yi stabilize the situation in North Korea, Yang Qindong, who was originally planning to return to Chichuan City to celebrate the new year, had no choice but to change his itinerary. Following Yang Qindong was the 1st Cavalry Division as well as the 6th wife Luan Xiaoyu. It was worth mentioning that Luan Xiaoyu was finally eaten by Yang Qindong. In the North Korean palace, only Luan Xiaoyu accompanied him and they met every day. Finally, one night, when Luan Xiaoyu boldly went into Yang Qindong's bed and said that she would be 18 in a month, Yang Qindong finally couldn't hold it in anymore and ate her clean. At this point she finally became the 6th wife. Before Yang Qindong left, he promoted some officials through his performance in the past 2 months. Among them, Li Jinzhu's father, Li Minho, was promoted to a general of North Korea and was allowed to establish a 30,000-man North Korean provincial self-defense force. Usually they were mainly responsible for the security of the province, and if they encountered foreign enemies, they were temporarily used to stop the enemy. Li Minho was put in an important position, and Li Jinzhu's face rippled with a charming smile. Coupled with the development of her husband, Tianhu, she had a hint of a mature woman's temperament. Speaking of Tianhu, he was the person who was most anxious to leave North Korea. Yang Qindong allowed the 1st Cavalry Division to begin to expand the army, but he could only stay in North Korea for a long time and couldn't find a suitable source of soldiers. Although he hadn't been idle in the past 2 months and had been looking for suitable soldiers in North Korea, the results were unfortunately not satisfactory. The soldiers who could pass their strict assessment were too few. In the end, only 100 people were recruited in 2 months, which was far from the goal of nearly 5,000 people. Now that he was finally going to leave and return to the grasslands, Tianhu was full of confidence. He couldn't wait to see the more powerful 1st Cavalry Division appear. He also couldn't wait to change his school star to a general star and step into the ranks of a real general. At the end of the year 145, Yang Qindong returned to the grassland city. It had been more than a year since he left. His return was welcomed by the city lord, Yu Mian, and the others. Most of the people in the city also walked on the streets to pay homage to their heavenly Khan. Luan Xiaoyu accompanied Yang Qindong by his side and looked at the people of the grassland kneeling on both sides of the street. She felt honored and happy, and the smile on her face never stopped. This was her man, the most powerful man in the world. Among the welcoming crowd, Yang Qindong saw Qin Bo, the political commissar of the 3rd Division Leng Army, whom he hadn't seen for 2 years. Half an hour later, in the Yang Mansion of the First City, the two sat together and listened to the recent reports of the 3 divisions of the Cold Front Army. 6th Young Master, we know for sure that the Golden Horde has changed its name to the Great Horde after splitting into several khanates. 6th Young Master, after our army set out, we encountered heavy snow. Relying on the compass, we climbed over some snow mountains and walked across some plains. Then we encountered the patrolling cavalry of the Great Horde. After quickly defeating them, we followed their lead and found many tall and fair-skinned people of the Guros tribe. We learned many things from them. The most important thing was that under the oppression of the Golden Horde for 200 years, they were extremely dissatisfied and were carrying out all kinds of resistance. Such things often happened in the Siberian grassland when the 3 divisions of the Cold Front Army entered. 6th Young Master, because our radio station was smashed on the way, it couldn't be used normally. Without asking for permission, Commander Wu Sheng and I privately decided to support the Gyuros in the Siberian region to resist the invasion of the Great Horde, and it was quite effective. Because of our bravery in battle, strict military discipline, and fair rewards and punishments, our army has now expanded to more than 30,000 people. After the 3 divisions of the Cold Front Army, we formed the 1st Division, the 2nd Division, and the 3rd Division. Each division has about 8,000 people. Also, the Jurchen Cavalry Division has expanded from the original 3,000 to the current 8,000. The news entered Yang Qindong's ears and he quickly digested it. The Siberian grassland that Qinbo mentioned was the future Siberian Khaganate. It effectively blocked the declining Great Horde and the rising Russian Empire in the northwest of the Great Ming Dynasty. The north of the Great Ming Dynasty was now the north of the current Liaodong, the northeast of China, including the Russian Far East. In ancient times, no one in the Central Plains dynasty had worked hard to develop such a place. At most, they would declare their sovereignty. After all, the climate here was bad, and it was quite difficult to develop with the production conditions of the time. Therefore, the people who lived here were all fishermen and hunters. The grasslands of Siberia had become a dividing line, separating these neglected areas from the war between the Great Horde and the ancient Russians. In other words, if they were willing, the vast land in the Far East would belong to whoever sent troops to the north of Liaodong. That was half the size of the Great Ming Dynasty. It was impossible for Yang Qindong not to be tempted. However, at the same time there was a realistic problem. It was too poor, and the winter was long and the summer was short. The climate was bad and it was not easy to develop there. The discovered mineral deposits were basically primary comprehensive ores, accompanied by molybdenum, copper, and so on. Yang Qindong really didn't understand why there was a lack of weapons in such a place. Soon, Qinbo had an answer to these questions. "Sixth young master, you don't know, but as you said, there are still some iron mines in the area. It's not difficult to find them. The difficult part is that there are no people who can produce iron. If someone knows how to forge weapons, they will be treated like a treasure. Sometimes, 2 tribes and forces will fight to find this person. If they can't be used, they will be killed. Because of this, there are fewer and fewer such people. Some people don't learn to forge for their own safety." At this point, Qinbo couldn't help but sigh and said, "Sixth young master, you didn't see it, so you don't know. In some small tribes, when they fight with outsiders, what they use is simply a lump of iron. It has nothing to do with sharpness, and they completely rely on their own weight to kill the enemy. This is also why when we appeared, few people were our opponents. Facing the sharp military sabers, cavalry sabers, and battle sabers in our hands, when some of the local men saw it, it was as if they saw a rare beauty." "There's such a thing? Then the Golden Horde, oh no. Now the Golden Horde is also scarce in weapons?" Yang Qindong never thought that there would be a shortage of weapons because of a lack of technology. No. Large forces would have a place where they could forge weapons. Those places were well protected and generally, there wouldn't be any danger. They would also attract more skilled blacksmiths. As time passed, the bigger the force, the faster it would develop. On the other hand, the smaller the force, the less room it would have for development. It's like raising war horses. Big forces naturally have good horse farms, which are heavily protected. On the other hand, small forces don't have enough strength to protect themselves. The more war horses they raise, the greater the danger they bring to themselves. This is also the reason why they are getting weaker and weaker. Qinbo's answer was very clear. Yang Qindong kept nodding while thinking maliciously in his heart. In the future, Russia's military equipment was always in the top 3 in the world. Could it be because they had suffered from poor weapons, so no matter how poor they were, they still wanted to develop their military equipment? Having said that, through Qinbo's introduction, Yang Qindong had a better understanding of the north, the northwest, and the northeast. He even had a general idea of how to develop there. If he wanted to develop there, he had to take it step by step. As people said, rice has to be eaten mouthful by mouthful. Yang Qindong was going to start with the army first. After all, without a strong military force to play a deterrent role, future development was just a fantasy. "Qinbo, you must have heard that the army has developed very quickly in the past 2 years. There are already 4 commanders in the army and the navy." Speaking of the army, Qinbo was naturally envious. "Yes, I heard about it from Commander Hu." "Well, how about it? Do you also want to be a commander and have a general rank?" Yang Qindong looked at Qinbo with a smile. "I will obey the orders of the 6th young master." Qinbo did not refuse, nor did he show too much desire. Instead, he stood up and asked himself with the appearance of a soldier. Okay, are you really going to listen to my orders? The smile on his face gradually disappeared, and Yang Qindong's expression became much more solemn. Yes, I promise to obey orders. Qin Bo continued to speak with his body straight. I appoint Qin Bo as the governor of the Far Eastern state, in charge of the local development and military affairs there. When I'm not there, you are the sky there and you have the right to decide everything. Yang Qindong made a very sudden decision. It was a decision he had never thought of before, but now it was announced. After the order was given, Qin Bo instinctively answered yes. But then his eyes widened. Sixth young master, is this me taking off my military uniform? Of course not. Yang Qindong shook his head and continued, the Far Eastern Army will be established under your leadership in the Far Eastern state, and you will be the commander with the rank of Major General. Hearing that he was still in the army, Qin Bo was greatly relieved. He was worried that he would walk out of the army, and as long as he did not leave, he could discuss what kind of army to bring. Chapter 952. Although Qin Bo believed that his commanding ability was not bad, there was still Wu Sheng among the three divisions. Compared to him, Wu Sheng was more of a professional soldier. If the 3rd Division was promoted to the 3rd Army, Wu Sheng would definitely be the commander. At most, he would be a political commissar. Although he was also a military officer, the political commissar was mostly in charge of ideology and logistics. This had always made him feel restricted. Now he had become the commander of an army. Although he was not in the cold front, at least he could make his own decisions. As for managing the development of the Far Eastern region, Qin Bo could only smile bitterly. Who asked him to say that the Far Eastern region was not easy to develop, but they could try to develop slowly? Since he had such awareness, who else should he give this task to? Appointing Qin Bo as the governor of the Far Eastern region and concurrently as the commander of the Far Eastern Army was also Yang Qindong's decision. The Far Eastern region had to be developed. Although it could not be as fast as he wanted, it would not be too slow. This required someone familiar with the region. This would save a lot of time. In addition, the situation there was very complicated. If he only sent a civil official like Yu Mian, what would he do if he encountered danger? He had to be familiar with the situation there and also had to be proficient in both civil and military matters. Without a doubt, Qin Bo was a very suitable candidate. With the matter settled, Yang Qindong chuckled and pointed to the chair opposite him for Qin Bo to sit. You are now a major general. You can't forget Wu Sheng and the commander of the 2nd Division, Luo Pa. You are all his subordinates. Now that you have been promoted, he can't forget. Therefore, I plan to promote the 2nd Division of the Cold Front to the 2nd Division of the Lu Army. The commander of the 2nd, 6th, and 7th Divisions, Luo Pa, will be promoted to Major General. The 3rd Division will be promoted to the 3rd Division of the Lu Army, and the commander of the 3rd Division, Wu Sheng, will be promoted to Major General. Considering that he was still in the Siberian plains and was unable to recruit the superior soldiers of the Han Army, he would do it based on the current situation. He only needed 1 elite 3rd Division, 3 hybrid masters and 1 female true master. What do you think? Of course. Qin Bo had no choice but to stand up and respond. He was already a major general, and there was no reason for him to stop others, not to mention that these 2 people were not inferior to him in terms of ability and experience. After a night of discussion, the 3 generals were decided. Qin Bo returned with satisfaction. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, slept very late. He thought a lot about the problems in the Far East. According to his plan, the 5-star army would have to fight with the Great Horde and even the Gyros. It would be a huge battle, and the transportation of supplies would become a huge problem. Without a strong backer, if he fought alone, he might not even be able to display a third of his usual strength. Thus, the establishment of the Far Eastern region was imperative. However, how to transport provisions and supplies from the first city to the Far East was still a huge problem. The closest ones were more than 1,000 miles away, and the farthest ones were more than 3,000 miles away. If they relied on people and horses to carry them, how long would it take to complete the transportation of provisions? As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions must move first. If this problem was not solved, then no matter what, they could not expect to fight a big battle or win a battle there. All kinds of images flashed through his mind. If he had a train, then the distance of 1,000 to 3,000 miles would not be a problem. However, the problem was that although there were many things in the warehouse, there was still nothing like a train. Should he use a car? There were some in the warehouse, but the number was limited. If he couldn't make it himself, there would be problems with the warehouse's support. He didn't even understand the basic principles behind it. Once the car broke down, it would be a pile of scrap metal. If he could not make it and he did not have a train, then what should he do? This problem was very difficult for Yang Qindong. When he heard Luan Xiaoyu's even breathing sound in the room, the word train suddenly appeared in Yang Qindong's mind. Yes, there is a train to transport. As if he had suddenly thought of something, Yang Qindong abruptly said, causing Luan Xiaoyu, who was already in deep sleep, to turn over on the bed. She seemed to be muttering something. Obviously she was dreaming of something. Seeing that he did not disturb his wife's sleep, Yang Qindong smiled quietly, then took off his clothes and walked to the bed. Lying on the bed and hugging the sleeping Luan Xiaoyu, Yang Qindong was still thinking about the train tracks in his mind. If there was no Yang Qindong, history would not have the first wooden track until the second half of the 16th century. It was in the mines and quarries of the United Kingdom and Germany that were made of useful wood. The cars that walked on the track were pushed by people or animals. It wasn't until 1767 that the price of metal in England plummeted. There was an iron factory owner who saw piles of pig iron that couldn't be sold for money and occupied a lot of space. So he ordered people to cast long iron bars and lay them on the factory's road. He was prepared to sell them when the price of iron rose. However, people found that the vehicles that walked on the road covered with iron bars were not only labor-saving but also stable. In this way, the train track was born before the train. Later, after continuous development, the iron bars were improved and made into groove-shaped rails. Later, the bottom of the rail was widened, forming an I shape like Chinese characters. This shape of the track was stable and reliable and had been used to this day. In this life, because of the sudden appearance of Yang Qindong, the train track also appeared more than 200 years earlier. There was a train track in Chichen City that was built according to Yang Qindong's idea, which was used to transport goods. It was only because later on Ryukyu Island began to build cement roads on a large area that the train track was stopped and unused. However, it turned out that the technology had matured. If a rail channel could be built from the first city to the Siberian prairie, wouldn't it be much easier to transport goods? One had to know that there was no shortage of iron ore in the Far East. As long as enough people were sent to mine, there would be enough skilled workers to build the tracks and lay them step by step from the Far East to the first city. At that time, some rail cars could be built on the tracks. It would be much more convenient and fast whether it was pulled by people or pushed by people. This was a bold idea but also a feasible one. When there was no shortage of people and iron, Yang Qindong firmly believed that this matter could be done well. He even saw the railway line that stretched for thousands of miles, saw a steady flow of goods moving back and forth, and saw the spectacular scene of the Five-Star Army's flag being inserted in every corner of the world. Early the next morning, Yang Qindong arranged for Beta Persei to send a telegram to Chichen City, asking for the people who had followed him to build the tracks and the mold machines that had been made before to be transported to the first city. He had great use for them. There was a strict order in the telegram that the relevant technical talents were not allowed to be intercepted in Chichen City. Those who were named had to be released. Otherwise, once they were found out, they would be held accountable. This was a rather harsh telegram and there was nothing they could do about it. After several years of development in Crimson City, there were indeed many talents. Their brains were active, and after reading the books that Yang Qindong gave them that could be called divine books, they relied on imitation to make a lot of things, and were constantly studying the core technology. Usually, such people were also regarded as great talents by Chichen City. If other provinces wanted such talents in the process of construction, they would not be able to do it no matter how hard they tried. But this time, in order to develop the Far Eastern region, Yang Qindong finally made up his mind to make good use of these talents. These talents could be compared to the sharp blades of thousands of soldiers and horses. Once the Far Eastern region was developed, with the vast land there, tens of millions of hectares of arable land could be cultivated. That could solve the problem of food and clothing for many people. Not only did he have to occupy such a place, but he also had to occupy it early so that he could benefit early. During the period before the new year, Yang Qindong was basically busy with this matter. Originally, he had to return to Chichen City to accompany his wives and beloved daughter, Lele. During the new year, batches of materials and talents were also sent from Chichen City to Origin City. After everything was prepared, Qinbo personally went to the logistics division and selected an entire division from the division commander, Yang Si. The division consisted of 4 regiments of 8,000 people. In Yang Qindong's expectation, Qin Bo took about 500 relevant technical personnel and thousands of old farmers who had enough farming experience to embark on the journey to Siberia for the second time. Not long after Qin Bo left, at the beginning of the third month of 1455 AD, Baiming's 400,000 troops set off in two directions. They gathered at Datong and Xian Mansion respectively, and then went straight to Wala Yeshin's troops. The situation in the grassland also became extremely tense at this moment. Yang Qindong had no choice but to stay in Origin City. He wanted to watch the two sides fight. It would be best if they could fight to a standstill. Only then could he leave Origin City and return to Chichen City with peace of mind. With Yang Qindong staying behind, the new army and the 1st Cavalry Division were on standby. Origin City, including the newly built outer wall of Mabe City, was very peaceful. Every day there would always be some Han people or grassland people who came to Origin City to avoid the war. Origin City was very generous. As long as you were willing to come, you could always arrange a lot of things to do. As long as you were not found to have any problems, other than Chichen City, there were many other places you could go. For example, the stable Laos Province, Vietnam Province, Cambodia Province, Luzon Province, Korea Province, and the Far East Province that still needed a lot of manpower. In short, as long as you were willing to endure hardships and contribute, there would always be a suitable position for you. It could really make everyone have food to eat, work and work. At that time this was not an easy thing to do. There was no need to talk about the grassland people. After years of fighting they did not think that anywhere was safe. It was the same for the people of the Great Ming Dynasty. After the Great Ming Dynasty was divided into the north and south, the two Great Ming dynasties were constantly accumulating strength in anticipation of the moment of unification. For this reason the people's taxes kept increasing. The people could be said to be miserable. Chapter 953. Now that the flames of war were rising, more and more people would be requisitioned. The people who could not stand this pressure regarded the first city as a paradise. It was said that as long as one came here, as long as one was willing to do something, there would be enough food to eat. Just this point alone was enough to make countless commoners yearn for it. The scale of the first city was expanding day by day, and the population was increasing every day. Every once in a while, a group of people who had just passed the examination would be sent to various places to resettle. Everything seemed to be thriving. When the North and South Ming dynasty chose to fight against different opponents, Yang Xie entered a quiet and peaceful period. According to Yang Qindong's instructions, he had to take advantage of this peaceful period to vigorously develop himself and count and integrate more people. This was because once he wanted to go to war, he would occupy new territory, and he would need new troops and people to guard and develop. Therefore, the more people under his power, the better. He was not afraid of having too many people, especially the Han people and other foreign races who were loyal to the Han people. After a short period of peace, Beta Persei also took the opportunity to be lazy. On this day he accompanied his woman, Kikij, to his mother-in-law's house for dinner. After Kikij followed Beta Persei back to Chichen City, she had more opinions about the strength of the Heavenly Khan. She thought of the wide cement road, the tall buildings that were dozens of feet high, and the electric lights that were as bright as day. Since returning to the first city, she had been persuading her mother to leave with her and live in Chichen City. Perhaps in order to better solve the worries of the senior cadres and generals, or perhaps in order to better control them, any military leader above the regimental level or the local bureau level could apply to have their own courtyard and house in Chichen City. Beta Persei, as the person in charge of Yang Qindong and a colonel, naturally had such qualifications. He had thought of bringing his mother-in-law to Chichen City more than once because the environment there was better, the security conditions and even the medical conditions were the best. This matter could be said to hit it off with Chichigo. This time the two of them also continued to persuade him. The main reason why Ba Dama did not say anything was that her son, Ba Tu, was still in the beginning city and had a post in the new army. She believed that this was her roots and was unwilling to leave. It was a little difficult to persuade her. The husband and wife took advantage of the fact that they had nothing to do today to continue their unfinished mission. Usually, Badama was always alone at home, so Beta Persei hired a nanny for his mother-in-law. She was Mongolian and only 17 years old. She was very agile. Later she was given a Chinese name, Alian, and Badama liked her very much. Today's meal was also prepared by the nanny. It was almost time for dinner, but he still didn't see his son Ba Tuesday. Ba Dama's face had a trace of displeasure as he said, "Didn't I tell him yesterday? Why isn't he here yet? Is he making his brother-in-law wait for too long?" In Batima's heart, her son-in-law, Beta Persei, was an extraordinary existence. He was able to serve by the Khan's side and gain his deep trust. Just based on this, she would wake up smiling even in her sleep. For the sake of her son's future as a mother, she should interact more with the two of them. This would definitely be beneficial for her son's growth. Beta Persei didn't care too much. She only had eyes for Chichigo. Batu and Batima were just loved by her. Afraid that his mother-in-law would be unhappy and affect her health, Beta Persei took the initiative to laugh and said, "Mother, don't worry too much. Batu is no longer a child. He's a battalion officer now. It's normal for him to be delayed because of military affairs." "What battalion?" "He was just promoted to battalion commander, most likely because of you." Chichigo, who was at the side, also spoke up. There was a hint of reproach in her tone. "Brother-in-law is such a busy person. How can it be so easy for him to come home? Why didn't you show up in time? Are you going to waste such a good opportunity?" It was said that girls tended to side with outsiders. Chichigo didn't necessarily mean that she didn't care about her brother after getting married. She just thought that such a good opportunity to get along with her brother-in-law would be wasted. It was too inappropriate. In the face of his beloved wife's words, Beta Persei just showed a silly smile. Batima didn't know how long she would have to wait and whether her son would come again. In order to avoid the awkwardness, she simply said, "The meal is ready. Let's eat first." "Then let's eat first. Mother-in-law, please take a seat." Beta Persei immediately agreed. He didn't think that Batu didn't come back because he had a bad opinion of him. They used to have a very good relationship and he had helped him a lot. It should be that he was delayed by something. The family of three sat together. Alien had already gone to the kitchen. She felt even more uncomfortable in such an occasion. Just as the meal was about to end, the outer door of the courtyard finally opened. There was the sound of footsteps. Batu had returned. As soon as she heard her son's footsteps, Batima's face immediately showed a happy expression. But before she could get up to greet him, Batu had already appeared, and he reeked of alcohol. "What's the matter? You came so late and drank so much wine." As soon as she saw her brother appear and he reeked of alcohol, Chichigo complained and then ordered Alien to prepare a hangover soup immediately. Batu reeked of alcohol as he entered the room. Yang Er's indifferent expression finally changed. The smile on his face turned serious. "Battalion Commander Ba? You drank? Don't you need to be on duty today?" Batu, who was about to call him brother-in-law, was stunned. Then he was sweating profusely. "Sis, brother-in-law, I don't need to be on duty in the afternoon, but I have to go to the barracks at night to patrol." "Since you have military affairs to do at night, why did you drink so much? Don't you know that Baiming is at war with the world of Wara? The beginning city seems to be safe, but the war is on the verge of breaking out. If that's the case, how can you lead the troops to the battlefield while reeking of alcohol?" Beta Persei's face had become completely serious, and he was even a little angry. He originally thought that Batu was a motivated young man. Even so, it was convenient to help such an ambitious young man within the scope of possible. But he didn't expect that Batu, who had only been a battalion commander for a few days, would be so drunk during the day. This was simply disappointing. As soon as Beta Persei's face fell, Batima and Chichigo didn't dare to speak. The little nanny, Alien, stood nervously at the side, not knowing whether to leave or not. The atmosphere in the room became very quiet and awkward. After a while, Chichigo finally couldn't help but say, "Second brother, he just drank some wine. It's not a big deal." "It's not a big deal if there's no war, but once there's a sudden war, do you think Batu will be better? He's now a battalion commander in Suhi's Tatar division. Do you know that the Tatar division's military regulations and combat power are second only to the 1st Cavalry Division? If Batu goes to the battlefield like this, what do you think will happen to him?" Beta Persei suppressed his anger and said to his wife reasonably, "What do you mean?" Chichigo naturally didn't understand this. If he violates the military law, he will be punished by the military law. It's even possible that he will be beheaded. Do you understand? Beta Persei said in a tone of disappointment. This sentence scared Chichigo and Batima so much that they tilted their bodies and looked like they would fall at any time. Fortunately, Yang Er reached out in time to support his wife. Alien, who was at the side, was also very perceptive and supported Batima. Is this serious? Batu, how can you drink so much wine in broad daylight? If something really happened, even your brother-in-law wouldn't be able to say anything. What are you doing? After Batima recovered from his shock, he immediately reprimanded his son. In the eyes of a mother without a husband, her son was her sky and her earth. If something really happened, she really didn't know how to continue living. Although Chichiga didn't say anything, her eyes showed obvious reprimand. Obviously, this incident angered her as his elder sister. She was angry at her brother's failure to live up to her expectations. Batu, who was targeted by everyone, had a wronged expression on his face. He did break the military law in the afternoon and drank, but he had no choice. But now no one seemed to be giving him a chance to explain. Since that was the case, he could only keep his mouth shut and let his mother, sister and even brother-in-law vent their anger first. Speaking of which, Batu was a good boy. He worked hard to become a battalion commander. Although he had to give face to Beta Persei, but if he wasn't, with Division Commander Suhi's temper, he definitely wouldn't have been entrusted with such a heavy responsibility. Usually he was also very self-disciplined. Things like drinking alcohol rarely happened. This time it was just a coincidence that he was in a hurry. Batu lowered his head and didn't refute. He was like a child who had done something wrong and was admitting his mistake. When Kikij saw this, she couldn't bear it and gently shook her husband's arm. Beta Persei sighed softly. He knew that he had to say something, so he said, "Okay, tell me, why did you drink so much in the afternoon?" "Yes." Batu answered, then slowly raised his head. "Brother-in-law, I knew yesterday that you were coming today, so I had already planned to have lunch with you and mother. But I suddenly received an invitation in the morning, so I didn't come back in time." "Invitation? Who is it?" Beta Persei had been by Yang Qindong's side for so long. Although he wasn't extremely smart, he could always see the essence of some things very quickly. And his intuition told him that this invitation was the source of all this mess. If he guessed correctly, the identity of the person who sent the invitation should not be simple. Chapter 954. In front of Second Yang, Batu naturally told him everything he knew. He immediately said, "It's 6th Commander Yang. He's marrying Xiaofeng today and has invited all of us regiments and battalions to congratulate him. Who would dare to refuse such a request?" Yang Lu's haha. "Batu, I didn't expect you to not tell the truth in front of me. Do you really think your wings have hardened?" At first, Yang Air was still listening attentively, but when Yang Lu's name was mentioned, he laughed loudly, and there was even a hint of anger in his laughter. "Brother-in-law, why would I lie to you? It's true." It was Batu's turn to be puzzled. He didn't know what he had said wrong or what nonsense he had said. "You still dare to say it's true? You just said that 6th brother Yang is marrying Xiaofeng, but you don't know that I just attended his wedding banquet a week ago. Why is there another wedding banquet so soon? Tell me if you're not lying, then what is it?" This time, Beta Persei had completely restrained his smile and changed his attitude into an angry one. "It's true. There was a wedding banquet a week ago, but this time he is marrying a new concubine. This is his 12th concubine." The aggrieved Batu continued to explain. He also attended the wedding banquet a week ago, but because of his identity, he couldn't sit at the same table as Beta Persei. This answer surprised Beta Persei. It's actually the 12th concubine? Although the young master didn't object to the high-ranking officials marrying concubines and even said that it was for the great Han Dynasty, it wasn't good to marry so many at once. As a servant of the Yang family, the young master only had 7 wives, but Batu had married 12 concubines. What would the young master think if he knew? Although Yang Qindong wouldn't say anything about such a thing, he still had to consider his feelings. Yang Lu was getting more and more out of hand. Thinking of this, Beta Persei lost interest in eating and stood up. "Batu, brother-in-law has wronged you. Don't take it to heart. This is all for your own good. But you have to remember that drinking during the day is always wrong, do you understand?" "Yes, brother-in-law, I was wrong." Batu did not dare to blame Beta Persei. He could still tell if Beta Persei was doing this for his own good. Beta Persei made his attitude clear. This was the first time he had taken the initiative to stand up for Batu's day. "Well, if there's such a thing in the future, you can go, but don't drink too much. Just be polite. If someone forces you on such a matter, you don't have to give them face. If someone tries to make trouble for you, you can come to me directly. I'll go and reason with them." Batu was so touched that he nodded repeatedly. "Brother-in-law, don't worry. This won't happen again." "Yes. Since you're back, spend some time with your mother and sister. You can go out for a while." Beta Persei gave Batama and Kikij an apologetic look. Now that such a thing had happened to Yang Lu, as the leader of the family, he had to take care of it. Beta Persei strode away. Aliyin hurriedly went down to prepare the hangover soup. Batama and Kikij were also busy helping Ba-Tu take off his coat to let him have a good rest. After all, it was no small matter to provoke Beta Persei's anger. In a courtyard in the first city, there was nothing hanging outside the door. This was because the servant, Yang Lu, did not know what to write. After all, he was the sixth in the family and had been given the surname Yang. However, the young master's surname was Yang and he was also the sixth in the family. This made him have too many taboos. However, with Yang Lu's status as a servant of the Yang family and his position as the head of the logistics division, even if the place he lived in was very shabby, it was still as crowded as a marketplace. When Beta Persei came here with 4 guards, he saw a long line outside the courtyard. Many of them were carrying things in their hands and it was obvious that they were there to give gifts. It seemed to be a matter of course for an official to receive gifts. It was also the best way to connect the relationship between the two parties. If you don't have a good relationship with your subordinates, everyone will make things difficult for you. Then your orders will probably go out of the building. Such an official would not be awe-inspiring enough. However, there should be a limit to receiving gifts. It was really a bit too much to be so blatant. Looking at this scene, Beta Persei was furious and strode to the entrance of the courtyard with a long face. Yang Heir's sudden appearance and the fact that he only brought 4 plainclothes guards with him didn't attract much attention at first. Those who were able to come here were either rich or respectable. There were even quite a few people who had quite a bit of power in their hands. Usually when they took action they would bring more than 10 subordinates with them. If they only brought 4 subordinates, it could only be considered ordinary. However, as soon as Beta Persei appeared, he did not intend to line up. Instead, he walked straight past many people, which caused some people to be dissatisfied. Some people with a bad temper shouted on the spot, "Hey, who is that? Doesn't he know the rules? Why is he cutting the line? Who said he isn't? Does he think he's a piece of material? Don't you know what kind of place this is? It's not a place where you can behave atrociously. Stop him and see who this kid is. Stop him, stop him." The queue was in a mess for a while. Each of them charged at Beta Persei as if this person was their common enemy. Suddenly chaos broke out. The 4 guards who followed him were all on alert with their hands on their backs. It looked like if the situation was out of control they would either pull out a gun or a sword. Beta Persei did not take any of this seriously. Instead, his face was cold as he stared at those people. The murderous aura on his body naturally spread out, causing those who wanted to come forward to reason with him to stop in their tracks. They were not stupid. They could feel that this tall person was not easy to get along with. If anyone went up first they would probably be dealt with. A bunch of cowards. Beta Persei sneered mockingly when he saw that those people were frightened by his glare. This sneer provoked a lot of people. At that moment, a few people who thought they had some skills finally could not stand it anymore. They walked out of the queue and headed towards Beta Persei. Some even clenched their fists and looked like they were ready to fight. The atmosphere suddenly became extremely tense. The 4 guards whispered while protecting Beta Persei, "Brother Beta Persei, they have a lot of people. Let's avoid them first." After all, the person in front of them was not a real enemy. They could not just kill people here. If they really fought, they would not even be able to exert half of their strength. "It's okay, these small fries can't scare me." Yang Chendong shook his head, looking very indifferent. After following Yang Chendong, he had seen all kinds of situations. There was no way he could scare him. Beta Persei did not retreat, and the others also surrounded him. A chaotic battle was about to start at any time. At this moment, the gate of the courtyard suddenly opened and a person dressed as a butler walked out. As soon as he heard that someone was making trouble outside, he was very surprised. Who in this beginning city had the guts to make trouble in front of 6th Master Yang's house? Did they not want to live anymore? He wanted to see who this person was. Did he really have 3 heads and 6 arms? Just as he casually took a look, his originally contemptuous gaze suddenly froze. As 6th Master Yang's butler and one of his most trusted people, he had seen a lot of the world. For someone like Beta Persei, the people below him did not have many opportunities to see him, but he did not know how many times he had seen him. When he saw that the person who came was Beta Persei, he was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. Then he shouted, "What are you doing? What are you all doing?" The sudden appearance of 6th Master Yang's butler and his loud shout immediately attracted everyone's attention. Then many people rushed over and reported their names one by one, looking like they wanted to leave a good impression on the other party. "Butler Yang, I'm Song 7. I went to give you a gift a while ago." "Steward Yang, I'm Dihai. We've been drinking together a while ago. You even said that I would cause trouble." "Butler Yang, A series of greetings and flattering voices rang out, but Steward Yang ignored all of them and went straight to where Yang Heir was. Everyone also made way for him. Chapter 955. Beta Persei followed Yang Ying into the courtyard, and the people queuing outside the door quickly dispersed. Just now they were criticizing Beta Persei. What if he took issue with them? If they stayed here at this time, wouldn't they be taking the initiative to tell him their identity? No one would do such a stupid thing. After Beta Persei entered the courtyard, he did not wait for Yang Ying to announce his arrival. Instead, he went to the main room and lifted Yang Lu, who was still asleep, out of bed. Yang Lu, who had been preparing to have a good night's sleep, was furious when he was disturbed. He wanted to get angry, but when he saw that it was Beta Persei, his anger quickly disappeared and he said timidly, "Second brother, why are you here?" When people lived in this world, there would usually be a few people who were afraid of them. There were 3 people that Yang Lu was afraid of. Yang Chendong was naturally the first to bear the brunt, followed by Tiger's Mane and then Beta Persei. Now that Beta Persei had appeared, it was no wonder that he became so obedient. "I'm here to congratulate you." The anger on Beta Persei's face had disappeared and was replaced by a smile. Yang Lu did not see that this was the calm before the storm. He really thought that Beta Persei was here to congratulate him on marrying the 12th concubine. He immediately laughed and said, "Second brother, how can I trouble you with such a small matter? Marrying a family is a small matter? Then tell me what is a big matter." Beta Persei was still not angry and still had a smile on his face. Yang Lu's face showed an awkward smile. I'm just afraid that second brother will scold me. I'm talking about you." The smile on Beta Persei's face began to fade. Without warning, Yang Lu suddenly shouted, "I'm talking about you. How long have you been in the beginning city and you've already married the 12th concubine? Do you know that the young master only has 7 concubines now? How can you be so unrestrained? What are you thinking, huh?" The sudden roar fell into Yang Lu's ears and he only felt that his eardrums were buzzing. His second brother's voice was really loud. It seemed that it had not changed after so many years. But Beta Persei was the second brother. Without Yang Lu, he was the eldest brother. He had to admit his mistake. He could only lower his head and pretend to admit his mistake. "Second brother, thank you for your reminder. I promise that such a thing will not happen in the future." Yang Lu bowed his head and admitted his mistake, making Beta Persei feel like he had not found his opponent yet. Thinking that they had been brothers for so many years and that Yang Lu was now the head of the logistics division, Beta Persei sighed, "Sixth brother, it's not that I have to be angry with you. If you really like this kind of thing, you can just find some in private. Why do you have to marry all of them?" In short, he didn't take this matter seriously. However, just 3 days later, another batch of military supplies from Liaodu arrived in the first city, and there was a middle-aged man in civilian clothes escorting them. Beside the middle-aged man, there had been 4 well-trained men. If one looked carefully, they would find that their footsteps were uniform, and their movements were full of the aura of a soldier. In fact, they were indeed soldiers, but they didn't belong to the Cold Front series. Instead, they belonged to the Action Bureau of the Anti-Corruption Department. The middle-aged man who was protected by the 4 of them had a great background. His surname was Wu Wei. Wu Wei's name was naturally not famous in the first city, but if it was mentioned in Crimson City, there would be very few people who didn't know about it. This was because Wu Wei was the deputy chief of the Anti-Corruption Department, and also the director of the Action Bureau of the Anti-Corruption Department. He was one of the right-hand men of Minister Wu Qian. It was obviously not an ordinary case that alarmed Wu Wei, the deputy chief, to come to the first city. In other words, an ordinary case wouldn't alarm someone like him. In fact, he came here for Yang Lu's matter. The Anti-Corruption Department of Crimson City and the Supervision Department had already received many letters of complaint from the Anti-Corruption Branch and the Supervision Department. The target was Yang Lu alone. The content of the report involved all aspects, such as money problems, abuse of power, and even the matter of him marrying an underage girl as a concubine. Considering Yang Lu's special background and status, the departments in charge of supervision in the first city naturally didn't dare to casually deal with him. They only reported the matter to the city lord, Yu Mian, who had the duty of supervising them. Yu Mian was also a smart person. After seeing that the people who reported were all pointing at Yang Lu, he didn't dare to make a decision on his own. Instead, he informed his father, Yu Qian, by telegram. Not long after that, he acted as if nothing had happened and didn't care about this matter. However, he consciously kept a certain distance from Yang Lu. It wasn't until the head of the city's internal supervision department, who hadn't received any news for a long time, found Yu Mian again that he said with a troubled expression, "You know what kind of person he is. We don't have the authority to deal with him. Let's report it." Just like that, the letters were finally sent to Crimson City through a secret channel and placed on the desk of the Anti-Corruption Department's minister, Wu Qian. This person, who had once sent his concubine, assistant and brother-in-law to the law in a fit of anger for the sake of his principles, naturally wouldn't turn a blind eye to these letters of complaint. He first communicated with the Minister of Supervision, Xinyu, and finally decided to let the Anti-Corruption Department take the lead to investigate this case. If it weren't for the fact that Wu Qian had a lot of things to deal with in Crimson City and couldn't leave, he would have come to the first city himself. Since he couldn't come, he sent his general Wu Wei to come. In order to not alert the enemy and cause too much of an impact, Wu Qian made a shocking decision. He didn't inform the sixth young master before he had evidence. This would save everyone from having ugly expressions when they found out that it was a false accusation. Hence Wu Wei came. Moreover, he came to the city quietly and inconspicuously. Thus the investigation began. Yang Lu wasn't in vain. With his position, he had made a lot of friends in the past 2 years. He even had his own sources of information in the supervision department. He was quickly informed that someone was investigating him, but because the person who tipped him off was too low level, he couldn't get more information. However, just the fact that someone was investigating him was enough to make Yang Lu nervous. His first feeling was that some of the bad things he had done had been exposed, but then he denied it. Logically speaking, if that was the case, they could have detained him first and then investigated him. Wouldn't that be much more convenient? Once some people saw that he had lost power, there would probably be many people who would kick him when he was down. However, they didn't do that. Did this mean that the other party was only suspicious and was investigating in private? If that was the case, it was very likely that the young master didn't know about it. Otherwise, the young master could take away all the power in his hands with just a word. With doubts, Yang Lu took the initiative to look for Beta Persei and conducted various tests. The results proved that the young master didn't have any objections to him. At least, Beta Persei didn't hear anything from the young master. This made him feel relieved and angry at the same time. Who on earth dared to investigate him in private? Did they really think that he was made of clay? Chapter 956. In his courtyard, Yang Lu no longer hid the anger on his face and said angrily, "Someone come here." "Master, what are your orders?" The butler Yang Xing appeared in time. "Send out some capable men to scare the other party." Yang Lu did not say it clearly, but Yang Xing understood. As Yang Lu's most trusted subordinate, Yang Xing was in charge of many things related to him. When he found out that someone was investigating his master, he proposed to teach the person a lesson. However, he held back because he did not know the person's background. Now that he was sure that it was not the sixth young master who was investigating him, Yang Lu did not want to hold back anymore. Yang Xing could not hold it in anymore. "Master, please wait for the good news. I'll do it now." Wu Wei seemed to be a reckless man, but he was actually very careful when doing things. He knew what kind of movement this investigation would cause and what kind of influence it would bring if the news was leaked. Therefore, after entering the beginning city, he rented a small courtyard in a private house and worked independently. Other than the necessary documents and people, he never met other guests in private. Even the people in the same department did not know where he was. At the beginning of the first year, all of his actions were secret. Only some smart people found out about the existence of such an investigation through some things. However, as time passed, after more than 20 days since he arrived in the beginning city, his residence was finally found out. The news was provided by 4 members of the Action Bureau from the Anti-Corruption Department. They said that they found someone wandering around during the day and they were afraid that the location had been exposed. At this moment, Wu Wei had obtained a lot of evidence about Yang Lu's crimes. Initially, he thought that he should report to the sixth young master after gathering all the information. After all, they had secretly investigated the sixth young master's servant for such a long time. It was time for them to fight for the initiative. Wu Wei didn't expect that someone would come knocking on his door so soon. Looking at the slightly late sky, Wu Wei made a decision. He would do a surprise attack tonight and gather all the main problems. Tomorrow morning, he would send an invitation to pay a visit to the sixth young master. That night, the coal lamp in Wu Wei's room did not go off. In the middle of the night, a blood-stained dagger suddenly flew into Wu Wei's room and nailed itself on his desk. The commotion attracted the attention of the other 4 members who were also awake. 2 of them stood guard beside Wu Wei, and the other 2 rushed out to look for the murderer. In the room, Wu Wei looked at the sharp dagger that was about a foot away from him. His expression became complicated. "Chief, are you all right?" The 2 operatives from Crimson City were extremely nervous. Although Wu Wei was also the vice director of the anti-corruption department, in the eyes of the people in the operations bureau, they preferred to call him director. "It's fine. They don't intend to take my life." Wu Wei shook his head. He had once participated in Lung Feng's assessment and passed with his skills. It was a pity that he was too old and was eventually rejected. That was how he got the chance to work in the Ministry of Supervision. Later on, when Chief Wu Qian set up the anti-corruption department, he took a fancy to him and was entrusted with an important task. That was how he got his current position. It was precisely because his position was high enough that he was able to perceive more things when looking at things. He knew that it would not be easy to investigate Yang Lu, a servant of the Yang family. In the worst-case scenario, his life would be in danger. Now it seemed that everything had come true. "Alright, you guys go and have a good rest. If nothing goes wrong, no one will come tonight. We can have a good night's sleep and go see the 6th young master tomorrow," Wu Wei said in a normal voice. When the 2 members heard that they were going to see the god in their hearts, the 6th young master, they were extremely excited. Perhaps they were not qualified to see the 6th young master, but it was already an honor to be able to walk around the Yang residence in the origin city. Sure enough, as Wu Wei said, the night passed peacefully. The next morning, after the 5 of them had breakfast, they went straight to the Holy Land Yang residence in the origin city with the invitation card. Ever since Tuoya married Yang Qindong, this place had become the residence of the Heavenly Khan. On the surface, the gatehouse was bigger and wider than before. The number of guards guarding the door had also reached 30. People, a platoon of troops. Once anyone trespassed without orders and permission according to the rules, they had the right to shoot and would not be punished. When Wu Wei and the others arrived, they saw this scene. Wu Wei took the initiative to hand over his invitation card, and then the guard took it and reported to the inside. Yang Qindong had woken up early. After training, he had already had breakfast with Luan Xiaoyu. At this time, he was enjoying the cool summer morning in the small courtyard. At this time, the captain of the 1st Guard Brigade, Qiu Vi, appeared and respectfully handed over Wu Wei's invitation card. "Wu Wei." When Yang Qindong saw the name and official position written on the card, he could not help but be stunned. Luan Xiaoyu, who was peeling oranges for Yang Qindong, had a puzzled look on her face. "Oh, is it Wu Wei, the Vice Minister of the Anti-Corruption Department and the Director of the Action Bureau? Why did Big Brother summon him?" Compared to Yang Qindong, Luan Xiaoyu was obviously more familiar with some of the high-level figures in Crimson City. Hearing that she reported the position based on a person's name, Yang Qindong said with a wry smile, "I didn't summon him. I'm afraid he has other important matters to attend to." "In that case, please." Although he did not know why he did not receive a report in advance when a high-ranking official like Wu Wei appeared in the beginning city, since he was here, it should be an important matter to report. After getting permission, Wu Wei came to a courtyard after 7 or 8 turns and finally saw Yang Qindong, who had been rumored in Crimson City. At this time, Luan Xiaoyu had already entered the house. As a woman, she knew very well when to appear and when to disappear. It was Yang Qindong's first time seeing Wu Wei. After all, when he left Crimson City, this person's identity was not enough to attract his attention. "Your Vice Minister Wu?" "Yes, 6th young master. I'm Wu Wei. This time, I was ordered by the minister to come to the beginning city to investigate something." Wu Wei immediately admitted. "Investigate something?" Yang Qindong pondered the deeper meaning of this sentence. "Yes." Wu Wei nodded in response. It seems that since Vice Minister Wu took the initiative to appear, there should be a conclusion to the investigation. Yang Qindong leaned back on the chair. No matter what the other party was investigating or what thoughts he had, since he appeared in front of him, it meant that there was a conclusion to the matter. He wanted to see what the anti-corruption department did in the beginning city without notifying him. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he took out a bloody dagger from his bag. Qiu Vi, who was beside him, saw this scene and shouted angrily, "Put the dagger down. What are you trying to do?" "Hey Qiu Vi, don't be so agitated. Vice Minister Wu won't hurt me." Yang Qindong did not have any intention of moving. He just watched everything calmly. Since Wu Wei had exposed his identity first, he was not here to assassinate him. Wu Wei only remembered the identity of the person in front of him when he was yelled at. Immediately he said awkwardly, "Sixth young master, I'm really sorry. I forgot the rules." "It's okay. You can continue." Yang Qindong stretched out his hand and made a gesture of invitation. He continued to look at him. Wu Wei was deeply impressed by Yang Qindong's calmness. However, he did not know that at least until now, there was no one who could be an enemy of the sixth young master. Even if Wu Wei had some skills, he would not be able to hurt him. Since that was the case, why should he be anxious? Wu Wei took down the bloody dagger and placed it on the stone table in front of him. Then he took out a stack of documents and placed them on the stone table as well. He said, "Sixth young master, these are some reports about Yang Lu and the evidence of his crimes in the beginning city in the past 20 days. Originally, I wanted to sort them out before sending them over. However, last night someone sent this dagger to my table. I didn't dare to wait any longer, so I came over early in the morning." "Servant Yang Lu?" Yang Qindong frowned slightly. His expression was extremely dignified. He reached out to touch the teacup and found that the tea was cold. Then he said to Qiu Vi, "Get someone to change the tea in water." "Yes." Qiu Vi replied and turned to leave. After leaving the small courtyard, he reached out and called a confidant. After whispering a few words in his ear, he went to find new tea and water. In the small courtyard, instead of drinking tea, Yang Qindong switched to smoking. He opened a box of beautifully packaged Con of Heaven cigarettes and tossed one to Wu Wei. Then he lit it up on his own. "You're saying that Yang Lu used this dagger to threaten you?" Yang Qindong finally spoke when only half of the cigarette was left. "There's no evidence to prove it." Wu Wei nodded, but his words were inconsistent with his actions. This already showed that Wu Wei had such suspicions. However, he did not dare to say anything without evidence. However, at such a critical juncture, someone had come forward to threaten him. Presumably, it had something to do with Yang Lu. Yang Qindong nodded. He admired Wu Wei for not saying anything without evidence. After all, once this matter was confirmed, no matter what Yang Lu had done in the past, just the fact that he threatened the investigation officer was enough to put him in serious trouble. There was no evidence to prove that Yang Lu was the one who threatened him. This only made Yang Qindong slightly gratified, but it did not mean that he was fine. The people from the anti-corruption department had been in the first city for more than 20 days, and they were only the vice chief. It was obviously impossible for them to make such a big scene without any evidence. Especially now that they appeared in front of him, it should be said that they had evidence. If that was the case, Yang Lu's crime would not be too small. "Tell me, what's the result of the investigation?" "Yes, the sixth young master." Wu Wei, who had been waiting for this sentence, straightened his body and extinguished the unfinished cigarette in his hand. He sat upright and began to report one by one. "The cause of this matter is that the anti-corruption branch of the First City Supervision Department received a letter reporting Division Commander Yang. Considering his special identity, the letter was finally transferred to the headquarters in Crimson City. After the final investigation, it was found that during Division Commander Yang's time in the Logistics Department, he used his power to embezzle about 150,000 taels of silver in the form of kickbacks and dividends. In terms of his lifestyle, among the 12 concubines, 2 of them are under the age of 16. According to the rules set by the sixth young master, they're all underage. I believe Division Commander Yang is aware of this. Then there's an additional violation of the law. Chapter 957. Not to mention the process of the report, just the final result of the embezzlement amounted to 150,000 taels of silver. Yang Qindong's frown deepened. He had once said that he would support the officials with a high salary. If one wanted to make money, then don't be an official. If one wanted to be an official, then don't think about making money. Otherwise, once the embezzlement reached 10,000 taels of silver, he would be beheaded without mercy. Looking at it this way, Yang Lu had already been beheaded 15 times. This made him feel disappointed and gave him a headache. As for the matter of marrying 12 concubines, there were girls who were not even 16 years old. It could only be regarded as a matter of style. In that era, it was relatively not worth mentioning. Yang Lu's residence. Beta Persei's sudden rush startled Yang Lu, who had just woken up. He instinctively thought that his threatening actions last night had been exposed. He knew very well that threatening an officer was a serious crime. No matter how scared he was, Yang Lu still pretended to be magnanimous and smiled. "Second brother, why are you here so early? Have you had breakfast? Let's go together." "You still know how to eat at this time? Don't you know what you've done?" Beta Persei snatched the chopsticks from Yang Lu's hand and shouted angrily. Yang Lu's heart trembled when he thought that his threatening of the officer had been exposed. However, he still pretended to be unafraid and said, "What did I do? I didn't do anything." "Are you still going to pretend like this at this time? Old Six, are you not going to cry until you see the hard way? To tell you the truth, the people investigating you have already gone to the young master. Do they dare to do this without evidence? I'm afraid it won't be long before they show up here. At that time, it will be too late for you to say or do anything." Yang Er saw that Yang Lu was still acting like a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. He couldn't help but angrily say. After Beta Persei revealed some information in his words, Yang Lu was no longer as calm as before. He finally panicked and asked, "Second brother, you said that someone is investigating me. Who is it?" Wu Wei, Vice Minister of the Anti-Corruption Headquarters and Director of the Operations Bureau, Beta Persei told Yang Lu the answer given by Chiu V. "Someone from Crimson City?" Beta Persei's expression changed again. He originally thought that some of the officials in the Origin City did not like him. He knew that the city lord Yu Mian had a bad temper. He had tried to sound him out several times and wanted to pull him into the group, but he was rejected. Thus he wanted to ruin things. However, he did not expect that it would be someone from Crimson City. If that was the case, he would be in deep trouble. Think about it, when third brother was the chief of security, he dealt with many people in Crimson City. They are simply taking revenge. Revenge? Beta Persei nodded first, then shook his head vigorously. But even if it's revenge, if you didn't do anything wrong, what's there to be afraid of? Second brother, everyone makes mistakes. I was just greedy for some money. I really didn't mean to harm the young master. If something happens to me, second brother, please help me. Yang Lu knew that this was not the time to be arrogant. He should lower his head when he should. He was just avoiding the main point and dwelling on the trivial. Just as Beta Persei and Yang Lu were still in the room, a group of black-clothed guards broke through the mansion's gate. They were fully clad in armor, with only their noses and mouths exposed. Suddenly, the guards of Yang Qindong's relatives appeared. The leaders were Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu. These two were also old men who had followed Yang Qindong for many years. They had been with him for many years. Yang Qindong had intended to send them to serve in the army several times, but these two seemed to have set their sights on the sixth young master. Other than the guards, they would not go anywhere else no matter what. Therefore, each of them only had the rank of major, but because of this, they were more trusted by Yang Qindong. Many important things would be done by them. The two of them came here this time under orders to bring Yang Lu back. As Yang Qindong's servant and also the head of the logistics division, Yang Lu could be said to have a lot of power in his hands. If he really wanted to do something, even the current city lord Yu Mian had no right to ask or interfere. His mansion had always been regarded as the safest place. However, today someone had barged in. Butler Yang Ying immediately rushed out with more than a dozen guards, looking like he was going to punish them. Butler, they seemed to be from the Ares guards. A guard who was about to rush forward saw the identity of the intruder and immediately stopped in his tracks. When the other guards heard this, they carefully identified the intruder and came to the same conclusion, so they all stood still. That's right, sixth brother Yang usually treated them well, but if they were to become enemies with the battle god because of this, they would never do that. Everyone in the first city knew that without the Ares guards, they would not have everything they had now. As Yang Lu's trusted butler, Yang Ying knew very well about Yang Lu's matters. He knew that once this matter was discovered, he would not be able to escape death. Therefore, he usually treated these guards well, so that when such a day came, they would be able to use their strength to at least kill a path of blood to save sixth brother Yang. In fact, this worry was not without reason. It was just that when the situation really happened, the guards that he had prepared with extraordinary skills did not even have the courage to move. At that moment he was extremely angry, but there was nothing he could do. No one stopped the guards from entering the courtyard and quickly found Yang Lu's room. When they saw that Beta Persei was also in the room, Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu looked at each other and took 2 steps forward together. Second brother, sixth brother, the young master invites you in. Please don't make things difficult for us guards. As Yang Qindong's personal guards, they naturally respected the Yang family's servants. Usually, if someone wanted to harm them, they would not let them pass. But now, the order was personally given by the sixth young master, so everything was different. Second brother. Seeing that the young master's personal guards had appeared, Yang Lu's eyes revealed a hint of longing and pleading as he looked at Beta Persei. Faced with Yang Lu's pleading eyes, Beta Persei gently shook his head. He would not disobey the young master's orders no matter what. He took the initiative to step aside and said with red eyes, "Sixth brother, don't worry. Second brother will plead for you. When the time comes, just say whatever you want to say. Don't hide anything. You know the young master. He hates it when people lie to him." Second brother. Yang Lu knelt on the ground. He was afraid that he would not be able to come back this time. Before he fell into the young master's hands, as long as Beta Persei gave the order to let him escape, the personal guards would not stop him. This might be his only chance. "Okay, don't beg me. Reflect on yourself and perform well. Take him away." Beta Persei turned his head to the side. He would not stop the personal guards from taking action. He did not have the authority and courage to do so. "Sorry for offending sixth brother." Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu stepped forward and supported Yang Lu, who could not stand up due to fear, on his left and right. Then they turned around and left. Soon the housekeeper Yang Ying rushed into the room. "Second brother, you must save our master." "I know." Yang Er nodded with sorrow in his eyes. Although Yang Lu hadn't admitted to some things, he could already see that his brother had caused quite a lot of trouble this time. If they didn't try their best to plead for leniency, it would really be difficult for them to get through this ordeal. Chapter 958. In the courtyard of the Yang mansion, Wu Wei sat opposite Yang Qindong. He watched as the God Master smoked half a box of cigarettes in a short time. He even saw the anxiety and anger in the God Master's eyes. Judging others by one's own standards, the most trusted servant around him turned out to be a big pest during the anti-corruption campaign. Presumably, no one would be able to stand it. After an unknown period of time, Yang Qindong put out the cigarette that had just been lit in his hand. He looked at Wu Wei and said, "I already know about this matter. I will give you a satisfactory answer. You can go and rest first." "Yes, sixth young master." Wu Wei was a very bold person, but sometimes he was also very rash. Otherwise, he would not have been appointed and reinstated by Wu Qian. But no matter how bold or rash he was, he still had to look at who he was facing. Yang Qindong did not intend to suppress this matter. Instead, he decided to deal with it. This already satisfied Wu Wei. Wu Wei finally left, leaving Yang Qindong sitting alone at the stone table. He did not get up for a long time until Wan Xiaoyu appeared and handed him a cup of hot tea with a concerned expression. Yang Qindong reluctantly squeezed out a smile. "It's windy outside. Let's go inside." Wan Xiaoyu accompanied Yang Qindong to the room in the inner courtyard, leaving his slightly lonely back. Yang Lu had been captured and locked up in a very secret place. Perhaps it was because of his special identity, but even Yang Er did not know where he was locked up. It was the captain of the second guard team, Dao Xiao, who was in charge of looking after him. He had received orders that unless Yang Qindong personally gave the order, no one was allowed to see him, let alone have any contact with him. Beta Persei knew that things were going to be bad. He immediately went to find Tiger's Mane. He knew that the person closest to his servants was their tiger head. 3 days later, Yang Si, who was supervising the construction of North Desert City, changed several fast horses and rushed over regardless of day or night. After the three brothers met, they went to Yang Qindong's residence to plead with Yang Lu. In the same small courtyard, Yang Qindong and Wan Xiaoyu sat together. Other than Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Si, there was no one else present. "Young master, I wonder how serious sixth brother's crime is." After Tiger's Mane became the commander of an army, his personality had become much more mature than before. When he opened his mouth, he went straight to the core of the problem. "It's all here. Take a look for yourselves." Yang Qindong's expression did not change at all, as if he was talking about a very ordinary thing. He pointed to the documents on the stone table that were half the height of a person. After the three of them received permission, they all stretched out their hands and looked at the crimes that Wu Wei had committed. When they saw that Yang Lu had used his position and power to obtain at least 150,000 taels of silver for himself, and at the same time he had married 12 women, 2 of whom were under the age of 16. Even though the 3 of them had prepared themselves for this, their faces were now filled with anger. Based on the things that Yang Lu had done, even if he was beheaded 10 times, it would not be wrong. But could they really behead him? After all, they were brothers. When young Xie was still very weak, they were the ones who worked together every day by the young master's side, waiting for orders. Now that someone was in trouble, they should stand up and help each other. After the three of them finished looking at the documents, they knew that they could not plead for mercy. The three of them did the same action at the same time, and that was to kneel on the ground. Their knees were close to the ground, and their chests were straight as they knelt in front of Yang Qindong. As if he already knew that the three of them would do this, Yang Qindong did not even blink his eyes. On the other hand, Luan Xiaoyu, who was at the side, was shocked. She wanted to stand up and say something, but she was Yang Qindong's wife. At this time, it was not appropriate for her to say anything. The weather at the beginning of May was already very warm. After 9 o'clock in the morning, it started to get hot. When the sun shone, Yang Qindong had already brought Luan Xiaoyu back to the house. The three people in the courtyard did not move at all. They let the sun shine on their bodies, and then they were sweating profusely. Time passed little by little. From morning until the moon came out at night, the three of them were still kneeling there without moving. Yang Qindong did not walk over to say a word. Some of the personal guards who were going in and out to do things also ignored them. It was as if they were not three people but 3 blocks of wood or stone pillars. It was already late at night. Luan Xiaoyu, who was lying beside Yang Qindong, finally could not help but say, "Big brother, are we just going to let them kneel like this? I heard that Yang Lu used to guard the Yang family manor in Baiming's capital for more than 2 years. Did Beta Persei look for you, or did Tiger's Mane tell you in advance?" Yang Qindong closed his eyes and said in a very calm voice, "Yes. It was the two of them who looked for me together yesterday. They said that they wanted me to say some good words in front of Big Brother. Although Yang Lu is guilty, but for the sake of following me all these years, I still spare his life." Luan Xiaoyu quickly confessed. Now, she was also the head of Yang Xie's publicity department. She was also the leader of the 5-person team in the Red Nest City self-inspection movement. If Luan Xiaoyu was a woman without any scheming, she would not be able to do these things. But as long as it was something that Yang Qindong wanted to know, she would never hide anything. This was because she knew very well that if it were not for Yang Qindong, she would just be an ordinary poor woman who could not be more ordinary. She would probably still be worried about her survival. Luan Xiaoyu's confession seemed to make Yang Qindong very happy. He opened his eyes and gently stroked Luan Xiaoyu's arm. There was finally a trace of emotion in his voice as he said, "Xiaoyu, do you know? A dike of 1,000 miles can be destroyed by an ant's nest. No matter how strong a force is, if the government is not allowed to pass and the officials are corrupt, then it will collapse very quickly. This is also why I asked you to carry out the self-inspection movement in Red Nest City. It's just a pity that human greed seems to have no limit. Those who possess will never complain about having too much and will always want to have more. Even if they have so much money that they can't spend it all, they still want to continue earning. When will this end? Don't they know that this is destroying their own foundation?" Luan Xiaoyu could hear that Yang Qindong was a little angry when he said these words. She nodded continuously while gently patting Yang Qindong's chest. "Big brother, let's not be angry. It's not worth it to hurt your body. Xiaoyu understands this principle. Many people understand this principle." "That's right. There are people who understand and there are people who don't. That's why we have to investigate corruption. At the same time, we have to continuously raise the various benefits of the officials. It can be said that as long as you have the ability and are willing to put in effort, then the money you earn is enough to live a prosperous life. Moreover, it can guarantee a bright future. But now, how many people are satisfied? Even Yang Lu, the person by my side, has changed. He has become greedy beyond measure. You have to know that in the past they were people who didn't know where their next meal would be. They helped me and I gave them everything they have now. Why don't they know how to be satisfied?" The more he said, the angrier he got. If Yang Lu lacked money, he could have asked him. Why did he have to accept bribes and use his power? Did he not know that there were many people watching his actions? Now that the matter had happened, it would not be easy for him to let go even if he wanted to. One had to know that it was his idea to vigorously promote the honesty of the officials. Now he had to slap his own face. How painful would that be? If this matter were to spread, where would his credibility be? In the future, how many people would be convinced by his words? How many people would believe him? "Big brother, don't be angry anymore. At worst, I will come out and save him. No matter what, Yang Lu is still your servant. Even if you want to deal with him, you have to have the final say. How can you do everything according to the law? Doing this will make some people admire your magnanimity, but at the same time, it will make some people bitterly disappointed. Although it is said that merits cannot offset demerits, merits are merits. Based on the fact that I have guarded the Yang family manor for more than 2 years and protected the safety of second sister and fourth sister, nothing can happen to me. Wan Xiaoyu changed her gentle appearance from before and became much more unyielding as she spoke. Wan Xiaoyu had carefully thought about these words for a day. Yang Lu was guilty and there was nothing wrong with punishing him. But since he was her big brother's servant, the punishment naturally couldn't be done according to normal laws. Otherwise, where would her big brother's superiority lie? Wan Xiaoyu was a woman. She was the kind of conservative woman in ancient times who regarded her husband as her sky. She didn't know what it meant when a prince was punished the same as a commoner. She also didn't know what freedom and democracy were. She only knew that Yang Xie's family business was painstakingly built by her big brother. Then he was the king of this power, the only king. No one could stop the king's decision. Otherwise it would be disobeying the king's orders and going against the king. That would be bad people. No one could go against the king's will. This time, since the king was in trouble as the king's woman, she should stand out and solve the problem. As for how to do it, she already had a plan and decision in her heart. You will handle it? Yang Qindong looked at Wan Xiaoyu with a suspicious gaze. His face was full of disbelief. Yes, if big brother believes Xiaoyu, then leave this matter to me. Yes, I plan to solve it like this. As she spoke, she put her small mouth next to Yang Qindong's ear and whispered a few words. Yang Qindong's gloomy expression finally returned to normal. His face also showed a trace of relaxation. You came up with this idea? It was Xiaoyu who came up with it. But I don't know if it will work. Wan Xiaoyu didn't dare to claim the credit. Yes, it should work. Hehe, didn't you say that Yang Lu is my servant? Of course, I have the final say in how to deal with him. Hehe, I suddenly don't feel sleepy anymore. Why don't we do something? After solving the problem in his heart, Yang Qindong seemed to be more cheerful in an instant. When he looked at Wan Xiaoyu, there was an indescribable expression on his face. Chapter 959. Big brother, what are you going to do? Wan Xiaoyu pretended not to understand anything and asked. However, she soon screamed, followed by giggles and shyness. In the blink of an eye, it was the next morning. Yang Qindong got up and exercised as usual. After breakfast, he came to the courtyard and saw the 3 people who were still kneeling. They were Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Si. Get up! With a sigh, Yang Qindong looked at the 3 of them with a somewhat complicated gaze. Young master, the 3 of them raised their heads at the same time and said in a hoarse voice. I know what you want to say. 6th Madam has already taken care of the matter. It won't be long before Yang Lu is released. However, he can't be the logistics division commander anymore, nor can he stay here in the first city. Let him go to the southern Ming Empire to collect intelligence. Yang Qindong, who made the final decision, announced his decision in front of the 3 of them. No matter what, Yang Lu was still someone close to him and everyone knew this fact. If something really happened to him, it was inevitable that some people with ulterior motives would think too much. This would be detrimental to the stability and unity of Yangxia. For the sake of the overall situation, Yang Lu could not die. However, although he could be spared from death, he could not be forgiven. It was necessary to arrange for him to leave the first city. As for what would happen after he went to the southern Ming Empire, it would all depend on his personal ability. Thank you, young master. When the 3 of them heard the result they wanted, they kowtowed to Yang Qindong again to express their sincere gratitude. Don't thank me. Yang Lu is your brother and also my brother. However, we are brothers. If he does something wrong, he will be punished. No one is an exception on this point. Yang Qindong shook his head and did not accept their gratitude. This sentence made the 3 of them look embarrassed. This time Yang Lu was purely courting death. He could not blame others. Since he did something wrong and someone came to investigate, he should take the initiative to admit his mistake and actively cooperate. However, not only did he not repent, but he also sent people to threaten the personnel handling the case. Was this not an additional crime? Fortunately, the young master was a sentimental person and gave him a way out in the end. As for sending Yang Xie to the southern Ming Empire, the 3 brothers did not have any objections. With the current strength of Yang Xie, no matter where he went, his influence was not small. Although the southern Ming Empire belonged to the rear of the enemy, they did not have a falling out with Yang Xie. As long as he was willing to work hard, he might be able to make a great contribution and return to the forefront. This was also a good way to train himself. The three brothers all agreed with Yang Qindong's decision. In the following time, Yang Qindong first asked Yang Si about the construction of North Desert City. When he found out that the outer city was already built, the development of the inner city was also proceeding according to plan, and the city lord Mao Xiang had also entered his role and was doing everything, he transferred Yang Si back and let him take over the position of the Logistics Division Commander. Yang Si, the task of the Logistics Division Commander is very important and involves many things. After you take over this heavy responsibility, you must do it well and strive for a better performance. Let others see that you family retainers are very capable and can also be given heavy responsibilities. Yes, young master, please rest assured. What happened to Yang Lu will definitely not happen to me. I will definitely not embarrass you. Yang Si vowed solemnly and said from the bottom of his heart at the same time. A young family retainer had already died in this position full of benefits. He definitely could not allow the same thing to happen a second time. I believe you. And Tiger's man, the training of the new army still needs to be strengthened. I have emphasized more than once that we need elite soldiers, not quantity. As for those who join the army because of connections or because of old age, if they are not suitable, we must be ruthless and replace them. As for the problem of manpower, there is even less to worry about. We can replenish them from the logistics division at any time. In short, the new army must be prepared to go to the front lines at any time and must win. Yes, young master. In fact, we have always been doing this. The logistics division has about 20,000 soldiers on standby. Usually, they work in the fields and carry out military training. Once they need people, they will enthusiastically participate. After all, no army is better than our 5-star army in terms of treatment. There is never a need to worry about their enthusiasm. Tiger's man nodded heavily. He almost used his head to guarantee that the new army was an army that could be brought out at any time and that could win any battle at any time. Yes, good treatment and high pay are the reasons why these people are willing to join the army. Just look at how the law and order can be stabilized so quickly after we have occupied so many places in the past few years. Are these people willing to be enslaved? Don't they have a sense of belonging to their nation? No, it is because we can bring them a better life. We can bring them the life that they have always wanted. After the country is occupied, their lives are better than before. They can choose to work in the fields to do business and to work in the factories to earn money. They don't need to live like before with no goals and no hope in their lives. This is everything that we have brought to them and also the reason why they chose us. But do you know that the appearance of a big corruption will change the world's impression of us? Corrupt officials are all sucking blood, regardless of whether it is the countries or the peoples, it is all ill-gotten wealth. Once there are many such officials, only the people will suffer. Once they can't live anymore, what do you think they will do? They will choose to rebel and kill us. Therefore, the honesty of the officials is very important. They represent not only themselves but also a force and a powerful country. This time, Yang Qindong said a lot of things in front of the three of them for the first time. It could be said that he was inspired by Yang Lu's matter. After saying this, Yang Qindong seemed to be a little dispirited. He waved his hand and said, "Well, Yang Lu should be released now. As brothers, go and see him and tell him what to do next. By the way, tell him that as long as he is willing to work hard and make achievements, I will see him again one day. If he continues to sink, then let's look at each other in the martial arts world." Yang Qindong made a break between himself and his servant, Yang Lu. On the other side, Luan Xiaoyu went out in the morning and found Wu Wei, who was staying in the guest house of the beginning city. The matter of the servant, Yang Lu, had been investigated. Wu Wei had relieved himself of the heavy responsibility. The next step was to wait for the results. Taking advantage of this time, he walked around the beginning city and checked the anti-corruption branch in the city. Once again, he talked about the importance of anti-corruption in front of his subordinates. When he woke up this morning, he originally wanted to go to the supervision branch in the city. Yesterday they invited him to give a speech. The supervision and anti-corruption departments seemed to be independent, but they were inextricably linked in many things. He must give them face. However, Luan Xiaoyu came and all the plans had to be changed. In a bright room in the guest house, Luan Xiaoyu dismissed everyone and met Wu Wei alone. "Vice Minister Wu, please take a seat." Luan Xiaoyu imitated Yang Qindong's appearance. While fiddling with the tea ceremony, she looked at Wu Wei, who entered the room with a smile on her face. "I don't dare. It's good to stand like this," Wu Wei said with some fear and trepidation. Although Luan Xiaoyu was more than enough to be his daughter in terms of age, she was the sixth madam. With this point there was a difference in seniority. Luan Xiaoyu did not force him. She specially fiddled with the tea ceremony. After a while, cups of new tea were poured out. Then she took out a cup and pushed it in front of Wu Wei, indicating that he could drink it. In the face of all this, Wu Wei expressed his gratitude and drank the tea in one gulp. Chapter 960. Investigating the people around the sixth young master, regardless of whether there was anything going on or not, would not be a simple case. In fact, the political significance was greater than the practical significance. If the matter was not handled well, there would probably be people who would take the blame. This would be a kind of provocation to the sixth young master's authority. The sixth young master had contributed a lot to the Yang Xie faction's success today. It was an exaggeration to say that anyone could be missing from the entire force, but Yang Qindong could not be absent. Even now his words still made sense. If something happened to such a person, it would not take long for the entire Yang Xie faction to fall into internal strife. Knowing this, they still dared to investigate the people around the sixth young master. It was not that the anti-corruption department and the supervision department wanted to cause internal strife, but it was their duty. They even had a kind of worry. If they did not investigate the sixth young master, would it make the sixth young master think that they had no principles and were incompetent? Therefore this matter had to be investigated. However, how to investigate and to what extent were the difficulties? Fortunately, Wu Wei had a good grasp of the situation. The sixth young master already knew everything. Now that the sixth young mistress had appeared to plead for mercy, a suitable excuse was placed in front of him. Of course Wu Wei knew what to do. I see. Then I was too nosy. Showing an expression of sudden realization, Wu Wei cooperated with Wan Xiaoyu's acting very well. Wan Xiaoyu also felt relieved when she saw Wu Wei's attitude. The other party's compromise was enough to prove one thing. That was, the anti-corruption department did not have the intention to target Big Brother. They were just doing their job. Even so, what should be praised should be praised. That's right. This time we've outsmarted ourselves. If I knew this would happen, I would have told the matter in advance. It wouldn't have been so troublesome. Of course, through this matter, it can be seen that the anti-corruption department and the supervision department's performance is very satisfactory. I believe that the sixth young master will also know. Wan Xiaoyu said with a smile. This was tantamount to settling the matter. The matter of the servant Yang Lu ended just like that. Your performance has been praised by the sixth young master. As for what to do next, it was none of other people's business. Wu Wei knew that the conversation had come to an end at this point. He tactfully cupped his fist and said goodbye. Sixth young mistress, this time I have been out for a long time. I want to leave with the next carriage to report back. Very well. A sincere smile bloomed on Wan Xiaoyu's face once again. She then waved her hand and Wu Wei retreated out of the door. With the appearance of Wan Xiaoyu, she found a suitable excuse to suppress the matter of the servant Yang Lu. At this time, Yang Lu was also young mistresses and was being reprimanded and educated by the young mistress. Although Yang Lu's life was saved, he had done something wrong. If he couldn't mentally recognize his mistakes, who knew if he would make the same mistake next time? For this reason Tiger's man and the other two talked to him earnestly for a full 4 hours. In the end, Yang Lu kept thanking the three brothers and admitted that he was indeed wrong. Only then did the matter come to an end. Old Six, the young master still has feelings for you and is full of hope. However, you have done something wrong, so this time when you go to the southern Ming kingdom, you should perform well. They've sent assassins to deal with young master several times. This time you can go and investigate these things properly. With third brother, the director of the security bureau, you can rest assured and do what you want. Hu Mang acted like a big brother and said in a lecturing tone. Yes, thank you Tiger's man for your concern. I know what to do. Yang Lu's face still had the joy of surviving a disaster. Yang Lu was safe and was only punished to work in the southern Ming kingdom. This was already a good result. At the very least, Hu Mang, Yang Er, and Yang Si were very satisfied. However, they had neglected one thing, and that was that it was easier to change mountains and rivers than to change a person's nature. No matter what, Yang Lu used to be an independent figure. Since coming to the first city for 2 years, no matter where he was the one teaching others a lesson. This made him accustomed to being high and mighty. This time he was taught a lesson by others, even if it was his 3 brothers. However, it was impossible to say that he was not angry at all. Yang Lu, who was angry, returned to his courtyard and saw the loyal butler, Yang Ying. After seeing that his master was safe and sound, he knelt on the ground and said excitedly, "Master, you're back. Are you okay?" Kind of. However, I can't stay here anymore. The young master arranged for me to go to the southern Ming kingdom to collect intelligence. Yang Lu said with a hint of unhappiness in his tone. Go to the southern Ming kingdom? What? That's the enemy's rear and it's dangerous. Could it be that the sixth young master wants to use this opportunity to punish you? By the way, master, did the sixth young master tell you this? Yang Ying was nearly 50 years old, so he naturally had more thoughts when he encountered things. Oh. From the beginning to the end, young master has never seen me. Yang Lu shook his head sadly when he said this. Although he was a little afraid of seeing the young master, he still wanted to see him, even if it was just to scold him to vent his anger. No wonder he hasn't seen you. It seems that the sixth young master really wants to abandon you this time. Yang Ying seemed to be emotional, but there was more or less a hidden meaning in his words. However, no one knew that Yang Ying, who had been following Yang Lu in the capital of Baiming, was actually a spy for Baiming, directly under the command of Chief Eunuch Jin Ying. No one knew of this relationship except the two of them. If there was a problem, he would report it directly and would not let anyone else know. This made it so that not even the security bureau could discover Yang Ying's identity. He had been lurking at Yang Lu's side precisely so that he could one day instigate a rebellion and use him. In order to achieve this goal, Yang Ying had gone to great lengths to not show any signs of abnormality, so Yang Lu had never been on guard against him. One could even say that Yang Lu's greed had become a habit under Yang Ying's influence. If Yang Lu had always been at the peak of his life, Yang Ying's persuasion would have been pointless, and he might even have exposed his own identity. But now Yang Lu had fallen to the lowest point of his life, and Yang Ying knew that his chance had appeared. As long as he put his mind to it, instigating a rebellion was just a matter of time. What abandon? Don't speak nonsense. Yang Lu's eyes suddenly widened, and then he hurriedly looked around. When he was sure that no one was paying attention to him, he breathed a sigh of relief. Then a trace of unhappiness appeared on his face as he said, "All right, pack up. We're leaving for the southern Ming Empire." "Yes, master." Yang Ying nodded in agreement and led a group of servants to make preparations. Without anyone else, Yang Lu's eyes were not as calm as they appeared. Yang Ying's words were still echoing in his ears, and he could not help but wonder if the young master had really given up on him. 1455 AD. For the Yangxia faction, it was a relatively peaceful year. They rapidly developed their economy, distributed farmland, established businesses, and built factories and schools within their sphere of influence. They were responsible for reforming the hearts of the people and laying down a foundation. Everything was in preparation for the next campaign. In contrast, Baiming and the southern Ming Empire, which had been quiet for 6 years, were extremely busy. The southern Ming Emperor Zhu Qizhen was busy attacking the self-proclaimed Little Southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Huichen's faction with Yunnan's Xiping Wang. They had already achieved some results and had established a certain advantage on the battlefield. Baiming's substitute emperor, Zhu Qiyu, sent out 2 armies of 400,000 to attack the Wala Yeshan's faction. They had also achieved some progress, especially the Xian Manshan's army, Shirwanshan's faction. From Tulu City they went all the way down to the Yellow River. Using the advantage of guns and cannons, they took down Jingzhou. They killed more than 5,000 enemies and captured close to 10,000 enemies. Shirwanshan's achievement had stimulated the Datong army's Yang Hong. Similarly, in order to gain merit, he also led his army into Hetao, wanting to have a decisive battle with the Wala leader, Yes Hen. They crossed the Helan Mountains and surrounded disordered Well City, preparing to use this method to lure the Wala's main force out. The plan was very good, and they had indeed surrounded disordered Well City. When the news reached Baiming's capital, the substitute emperor Zhu Qiyu was extremely excited. In his view, as long as he could defeat the Wala's Yes Hen, it would be enough to prove that he was stronger than his brother. This was because Ingzong had lost to Yes Hen in the Tumu fortress. If not for the Duke of Loyalty's timely intervention, he might not have survived. Thinking about the Duke of Loyalty, Zhu Qiyu could not help but feel angry. This Yang Qindong, who had the title of Duke of Great Ming, was actually a person with the ambition of a wolf. Sooner or later he would become a huge problem for him. Although both sides were cooperating now, it was only because of the situation. He had already thought it through. Once he defeated Yes Hen and conquered southern Ming, it would be time for him to make a move on the Duke of Loyalty. He believed that under the power of the entire country, the Duke of Loyalty, who only occupied some remote territories, would not be his opponent. Looking ahead, in order to commend the contributions of Shirwanshan and Yang Hong, He took out 200,000 taels of silver from the already stretched state treasury to reward the three armies. He wanted to use the silver to motivate his soldiers so that they would be more courageous in future battles. Zhu Qiu's idea was good, but he underestimated the greed of his subordinates. Whether it was the landowning households or the eunuch households, especially the latter, they did not have many relatives in the world. In their eyes, all kinship and feelings were not reliable, only money was real. Once the 200,000 taels of silver were taken out, more than half of it was quickly divided among them. After being exploited layer by layer, when it reached the hands of Yang Hong and Shi Wanshan, the 100,000 taels was reduced to 10,000 taels. Chapter 961. It had shrunk by 9/10. When the silver arrived, the two commanders were worried sick. The soldiers all knew that the emperor had given them 100,000 taels of silver as a reward. But with this amount of silver, how much would each person get after dividing it among the 200,000 soldiers? It was better not to divide this amount of money. But if they did not divide it, it would affect the morale of the soldiers. What should they do? When they heard that the silver had already arrived, many generals and soldiers who had made outstanding contributions revealed looks of eagerness. Helpless, the two commanders could only take out 10,000 taels of silver to reward those who had made outstanding contributions. However, many more people did not receive a single tael of silver. This caused many generals and soldiers to begin to complain, and the morale of the army began to fluctuate because of this. It was also at this time that Yeshin's counterattack arrived. First, outside disorderly Well City in the Hatao region, 200,000 cavalry suddenly appeared. The momentum was so great that when the news reached the ears of Yang Hong, he had a face of disbelief. How can this be? Yeshen only has so many soldiers. How can there be so many enemies appearing all of a sudden? This is definitely not possible. The roar was still ringing out in the tent when the scout general who had made the report was already half kneeling on the ground. Commander, it's not only the Wala cavalry that's coming, but also the cavalry of the Ili tribe, present-day Turpan. We've already merged with them. Right now, their vanguard is about to make contact with our vanguard. Commander, please make a decision quickly. When he heard that Ili division had also sent out their troops, Yang Hong fell back into his chair with a putong sound. The situation was completely out of his expectations. Originally, he had many soldiers and generals. But now, everything had turned around. He had become the one at a disadvantage. In addition, when they were dividing the silver, many of the soldiers were still dissatisfied. With such morale, how could they fight against the enemy? Retreat to Helan Mountain and wait for reinforcements at Ningxia garrison. Yang Hong knew that time did not wait for anyone. He quickly gave the order. Retreating without meeting the enemy was because they did not have a proper plan. This caused the formation of the 200,000 Ming army to be messed up. Using this opportunity, the Wala and Ili division launched a frenzied attack. The Wala army that was surrounded in disorderly Well City also took the opportunity to kill their way out. Under the pincer attack, the Baiming army was defeated. More than 10,000 men died, 40,000 were captured, and many escaped. Even the 100 red coat cannons were lost. Only 10,000 men from the firearm unit retreated. When Yang Hong brought his army back to Ningxia garrison, the 200,000 men only. This tragic situation made Yang Hong feel like vomiting blood. But the situation made him bite the bullet and ask for reinforcements from Baiming. Yang Hong in Hatao land was defeated. Yeshen was busy cleaning up the battlefield. While catching the deserters and settling the prisoners, he also ordered General Kansa to lead 30,000 men towards Lang Mountain. He wanted to go through Lang Mountain and Yin Mountain to break the siege of Shajing City. But his real purpose was to attack the Baiming Shenfu army there. After surrounding Shajing City for nearly 2 months, Shi Wanshan, who saw that the enemy had run out of food and was about to take down the city, suddenly received an urgent report from a scout. They had encountered too many defeated soldiers in front. They all said that Yang Hong was defeated. Now, Ili division's cavalry was heading towards the Shajing city. Arriving in front of the map, Shi Wanshan quickly determined that they would become the next target of Wala and Ili division's allied forces. Their military strength was not far below the enemy. Shi Wanshan had no choice but to give up on Shajing city that was about to be in his hands. He even gave up on Jingzhou city that he had just taken down and retreated to Sanbuchuan behind him. Shi Wanshan was very clear that Jingzhou city was a lone city. Once the army retreated there, if the reinforcements did not arrive in time, just the 200,000 men army's food and drink would be enough to crush the city. Therefore, when making this decision, even though they knew that they would be punished for abandoning the city, no matter if it was Deputy Commander Ancient River, Ning Wenfeng or eunuch Deng Chong, none of them had any doubts. More and more Datong Prefecture soldiers retreated from the battlefield and took the route of Jingzhou City. The appearance of these 50,000 people caused Shi Huanshan's army's morale to be even more lax. Some of the soldiers who did not know the truth actually followed these deserters, causing chaos to appear in the Shen Prefecture soldiers who were affected. Under the urgent military situation, Shi Huanshan did not have time to make any more arrangements. He could only watch as chaos appeared in the army and retreated to Sanbuchuan City behind him. The enemy chased too hastily. Sanbuchuan City was not big. Even if the 4 gates were wide open, they would not be able to let in 200,000 men army in a short period of time. Many soldiers saw Kun Sa and his 30,000 steel cavalry chasing behind them. They had no choice but to give up on entering the city and head northeast. Their target was very clear. It was the largest city in the grassland Shurcheng. Many of them had heard of it before. It was a paradise for the Han people. As long as they went there, they could earn a lot of money and protect their own safety. 50,000 Datong deserters and 10,000 Shen Manor deserters who were affected. A total of 60,000 people were madly marching toward the first city. With such a huge commotion, the scouting troop naturally reported the news to Yang Qindong at the first possible moment and reported it to him. 60,000 young and able-bodied men. This is good stuff. Take them all. It would be a waste not to take advantage of a free opportunity. Yang Qindong would never give up such an opportunity. He ordered the logistics division to open a shelter between Mount Saihan and Tulu City. At the same time, he ordered the new army to go there and take charge of the security work. In addition to preventing these 60,000 deserters from causing trouble, there was another more important purpose. It was to prevent the cavalry from charging in. General Kun Sa chased all the way here. Other than picking up some weapons and supplies left behind by the Baiming soldiers on the way, he only captured 1,000 deserters. This made him very unhappy. When the army arrived at Sambulakwin, they saw that it was already heavily guarded. After seeing that the city tower was full of Baiming soldiers, Kun Sa, who did not bring any siege weapons, gave up on taking over the city. Instead, he continued to head north. He had his eyes on the 60,000 deserters. If he could intercept all of them and use them for his own purposes, it would be a great victory. Both sides had the same goal. The 5-star army and the Baiming forces met on the grassland at the same time. Hundreds of shelters had been built. The Baiming soldiers who escaped here could finally put down their worries. One by one, they lined up and entered to register in an orderly manner. They were ready to enter Shurcheng and join the logistics division. Around them were more than 20,000 cavalry soldiers. It was the new army led by Tiger's Man. Looking south from here, they could vaguely see the grassland cavalry army coming from afar. Kun Sa rode on his horse. Beside him were valiant warriors. Just as they were moving forward, the vanguard general and Keegan appeared in front of him on their horses. "General, there is a large number of 5-star army soldiers with the 5-star flag in front." 5-star army? The army of the Heavenly Khan? Another deputy general, Wooly Ji, said. "General, before we came, General Yes Hen repeatedly told us not to be enemies with the 5-star army." "What are you looking at?" Kun Sa's face was full of disdain. As the generals of the Ili army, their territory was not connected to the 5-star army. What they knew and understood were only some rumors. Although this loyal duke of the Ming dynasty had many titles such as the Heavenly Khan, the God of War, the Messenger of the Tingri Heaven, and so on, Kun Sa did not care about any of these. He only worshipped powerful strength. How many people do they have? A lot. Maybe not as many as we do, but it's not much different, he Keegan reported. If they don't have as many as we do, what is there to be afraid of? We chased these 60,000 Ming dynasty soldiers all the way here. We are about to get them and now you want us to leave? How can there be such a thing in the world? How about this, Keegan, you go and talk to them. We won't make things difficult for them. Don't the Han people have a saying that when we meet, we will share half? Since that's the case, let them give us 30,000 prisoners and we will withdraw. Negotiate? But what if they don't agree? Keegan did not think that the other party would listen to him at this time. After all, no one would easily agree to take out the fat meat in their mouth. Don't agree? Then not only do we want these 60,000 people, we also want these 5-star army soldiers as captives. We also want to take them to the Shur city behind him. I heard that it is the largest city in the grassland. Hihi, I really want to see it, Kunsa said heroically. In the past, the Tatar tribe was suppressed by the great Khan of Tuachuo-Buhua, so it was difficult for the Ili army to get their hands on this place. However, it was different now. Tuachuo-Buhua was dead, and the Tatar forces had fallen apart. They also had a relationship with Yeshen. Now there was no one who could suppress them. What was there to be afraid of? Furthermore, people had always said that the Han people were a bunch of herbivores. They valued Confucianism, which was the principle of being a person. It was said that the high officials in the imperial court were all led by these people. On the other hand, the military officers had a lower status. What was so scary about such a race in power? Perhaps as soon as his cavalry charged, these people would be frightened and flee in all directions, just like those Ming soldiers outside disorderly Well City. Didn't they flee when they saw them coming? Kunsa treated the 5-star army as the Ming army. This was his biggest mistake. After receiving the order, Keegan turned around and returned to the front of the army. Then he led 50 cavalrymen and went straight to the camp of the new army. 3 miles in front of the camp, they were surrounded by hundreds of cavalrymen of the reconnaissance group. The commander, Ding Shan, rode on a maroon horse and appeared in front of Keegan at a steady pace, blocking the cavalrymen's path. Chapter 962. Go, call your Duke of Loyalty out. I have something to ask him. Keegan rode on his horse and did not care about the cavalry that outnumbered him. Just like Kunsa, he did not care about the great Ming dynasty's cavalry. When Ding Shan appeared, he originally wanted to ask the other party what was the matter and why they were here. He didn't think that she would be so arrogant, directly asking to see the 6th young master. She even had such an arrogant look on her face. His anger immediately flared up. Who was the 6th young master? In the hearts of the soldiers he was like a god. In the eyes of some people he was like a second parent. In the military camp, when you were angry or drunk, you could scold anyone. Even if you achieved outstanding military service, you could point at your superior and scold him for a while. At most, you could just apologize after sobering up and everyone would still be good brothers and comrades. However, no matter what, no one dared to speak ill of the 6th young master. This was because they would be ostracized and criticized by everyone else. In the best case, they would immediately be discharged from active service. In the worst case, they would be punished or even beheaded in public. With such a noble authority, the person who came dared to ask to see him and even acted as if it was only natural. There was no smile on Ding Shan's face. It was as if he did not understand. He asked again, "You want to see the Duke of Loyalty?" "That's right." Keegan nodded, still with his nose in the air. "Okay, then I'll take you to see him." Ding Shan nodded. Although it was said that envoys were not killed when 2 armies fought, these people actually looked down on the 6th young master. This was equivalent to insulting all the soldiers of the 5-star army. This was a threshold that could not be crossed. When he heard that Ding Shan would take him to see the Duke of Loyalty, Keegan immediately calmed down. He knew that as long as he showed his ruthless side, these Han cavalry would not dare to disobey. Well, the facts proved his conjecture. However, he did not know that his guess was not even half correct. Because in the next second, Ding Shan taught him how to be a person. He raised his right hand up high and then brought it down abruptly. "Tie them all up," he said. Even though some of the cavalrymen were prepared to resist, their resistance was futile in the face of the scouts who outnumbered them by several times. In Yang Xie's army, the strongest was naturally the Lung Feng, followed by the cavalry. The 1st Cavalry Division was even more powerful than the Cold Vanguard. In fact, when they weren't involved in sieges, they were even more powerful than the Cold Vanguard. However, there was another force that was also very strong, and that was the reconnaissance force. Being able to become a scout, especially a qualified cavalry scout, meant that they were 1 in 100. If there was no good reason to treat them like this, it would be unreasonable. It's like this. Ding Shan knew that he had to explain the situation clearly. Otherwise he would be in the wrong. Therefore he repeated what he had said to Keegan. As soon as Ding Shan finished speaking, a large foot suddenly kicked over, leaving a mark on Keegan's face. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Perhaps it was because he used too much force, even his snot and saliva flowed out. Needless to say, it was Tiger Mane who kicked Keegan. How dare he disrespect the young master? Just based on this, it would not be too much to kill him. Clang. Another kick was sent out. This time it was Shibi who did it. After being used by Yang Qindong for so long, He had always wanted to repay him. But now someone dared to look down on the sixth young master. Based on this, if he did not kick Hikagen, he would not be able to vent his anger. Hikagen, who had been brought into the tent, thought that he had found a place to seek justice. However, he did not expect to be kicked twice in a row. The kicks were not light either. He could feel the pain on his face, but because his mouth was gagged, he could not say anything. "Deputy Commander, I don't think there's any need to hesitate. Let's just attack." Tiger, Mane said as if he had not vented his anger after kicking Hikagen. "I think so. And once we attack, we must injure them severely. This person should be of some use." Shibi looked at Hikagen, who was lying on the ground with a face full of grievances. His eyes revealed a terrifying smile. Hikagen was unlucky. He had only said one disrespectful sentence and he was ruthlessly beaten up. What made him even more confused was that when the three Han people looked at him, they all revealed expressions of interest. Because he didn't understand Chinese, he couldn't understand what they were thinking and what they were talking about. He could only feel that there was a deeper meaning in their gazes, and he couldn't help but feel his chrysanthemum tighten. Hikagen thought too much. No one was interested in him. They were only interested in his identity and had nothing to do with his body. Then he was brought out of the tent and his nose was cut. In the Five-Star Army's military rules, this was no different from a dead person. He thought that this was a punishment from the enemy and that he was destined to die. But once again things went beyond Hikagen's expectations. He was let go just like that. Along with him were 50 cavalrymen. But 3 of them had already become corpses due to excessive bleeding. Their horses and sabers were returned to them. Then they were let go just like that. As if to humiliate him, Hikagen was forced to walk around the new army camp so that every soldier could see his miserable state. Knowing that he was being humiliated, Hikagen's eyes were filled with tears but his gaze was resolute. This was because he was using this method to observe the Five-Star Army's camp. Needless to say, he gained quite a lot. For example, he saw many soldiers eating and drinking together. Some even fell asleep in the open space of the camp. But in the face of all this, no one cared. Just you wait. With such lax military discipline, you will not be a match for our 30,000 cavalrymen. I will definitely take revenge for this humiliation. Hikagen thought hatefully in his heart. After a round of running around the barracks, it was already afternoon. He and Hikagen were released. Once he was a mile away from the Five-Star Army's reconnaissance team, Hikagen spurred his horse and rushed back to his own camp. There was only one thing left in his heart: revenge. In the Ili camp, Kansa was waiting for news. When he arrived, he saw Hikagen with blood on his face. After taking off his black scarf, he looked terrifying. When he saw him, Kansa immediately asked, "Who are you?" Just this one sentence made Hikagen cry. "General, look carefully. I am your vanguard, Hikagen." "You are Hikagen. How did you end up like this?" Kansa was puzzled. He really could not understand. Hikagen was fine when he went out. How did he come back with a face covered in blood? He could not even recognize him. At that moment, Hikagen told Kansa everything that had happened to him. Of course, he did not exaggerate. In short, the Five-Star Army was too arrogant. They did not follow the rules at all and did not take their 30,000 cavalrymen seriously. Most importantly, their military discipline was very lax. Chapter 963. Lack of discipline? How do you know that? Kansa caught the main point. They wanted to humiliate me. After cutting off my nose, they walked around the camp. What they didn't know was that I saw their true colors. Oh, some of the soldiers were eating and drinking. Some of them were sleeping in broad daylight. They didn't look like an army that was good at war. "General, as long as you give me 5,000 cavalrymen, I will be able to break their morale with a single charge. I will be able to defeat them and make them flee in all directions," Hikagen said confidently. Good, good. Kansa laughed when he finally heard some useful information. He had never believed that the Han cavalry would be so powerful. In his eyes, the reason why they said that was because they did not want him to be the first one to gain merit. That was why they said that, to scare him. Now that Hikagen saw it with his own eyes, he believed in his own judgment even more. The sky was getting dark and it was just past the 15th day of the month. The moon was bright and he had the idea of sneaking into the camp. "I order." Kansa's confident voice came from the tent. In the camp of the new army, Tiger's man and Shibi had come up with 2 battle plans. They gathered all the officers above the regimental level and announced their orders. Finally, there was a big battle to fight. All the officers were very excited. It had been 2 years since they eliminated Fan Yuhai and unified the Mongolian tribes in the north of the Gobi Desert. During this period of time, they had been constantly training their troops and were itching for a fight. Now that they finally had a chance to show off their skills, none of them wanted to give it up. Everyone took the initiative to be the main attacker. 30,000 cavalrymen. There's no need to fight. Everyone will have meat to eat. But I'll say this first. If anyone dares to retreat during a battle, they'll only be fit to be the reserve team the next time there's a mission. Tiger's man glanced at every officer in the meeting. There was a warning and reminder in his eyes. Don't worry, Commander. This is our new army's chance to shine again. We won't let you down. That's right. If our light cavalry regiment dropped the chain and let them escape, then you can take my head as the regiment commander. If I can't break through the enemy's battle formation in the first charge, I don't want my head anymore. All the officers spoke one by one, made their stand, and even made military orders. Tiger's mane nodded excitedly. All right, I'll remember what you've said. Please remember that military law is merciless. If there's a problem, you'll have to be prepared to be punished by military law. Tiger's mane couldn't be blamed for being so careful. There hadn't been any major battles in the past 2 years, and many of the new soldiers in the army hadn't really seen blood. Although the training had been targeted, a real battlefield and a drill were two completely different things. Any underestimation of the enemy could cause irreparable losses. In order to eliminate the enemy, she and the military staff made a total of 2 plans. The first plan was that if the enemy attacked the camp at night, they would beat them at their own game. The second plan was that if the enemy didn't attack the camp, they would charge at dawn. That was when the enemy's defense was at its weakest. The night came as expected. The moon hung high in the sky, shining down on the grassland. It allowed Ely to see the army clearly from afar. At the same time, their movements were perfectly captured by the scouts. They're here. They're really moving out. After the scouts reported the news to the military, Tiger's man rubbed his hands in excitement. However, when he heard that the enemy only had 5,000 cavalry, he couldn't help but reveal a disappointed expression. They only sent so few troops? It's not enough. Commander, don't worry. They're obviously looking down on us. Since that's the case, we just need to advance to the second plan. She seemed to have understood the thoughts of his opponent. He must have let Keegan slip around during the day to show his weakness. Since that was the case, he would let them know the consequences of trusting his own eyes. Yes, that's right. Tiger's man nodded heavily. He then looked at the messenger and said, Order the direct troops to stay behind and attack the enemy. The Tatar division will flank the enemy from the left flank. The recruit division will flank the enemy from the right flank. The light cavalry division will circle the enemy from the rear. The heavy cavalry division, the scouts, and the military will charge at the enemy from the front in an hour. Once the 2 red signal flares are used, the entire army will attack. After the order was given, a few messengers moved out and spread the news that the second plan was to be carried out in advance. Immediately, the various divisions and regiments that were already prepared on the outskirts of the camp all went to their respective destinations. Only the direct troops were left behind to prepare for an ambush. Keegan's face was wrapped in a black cloth, covering his somewhat frightening face. He led 5,000 cavalry and charged straight at the enemy. When he was only a mile away from the camp of the new army, he still didn't see anyone appear to stop him. He only saw a few 5-star army soldiers that were in charge of night patrol running around. He couldn't help but let out a victorious smile. Everything was as he had expected. The new army was just for show. He didn't think that they would dare to attack at night. Since that was the case, he would kill to his heart's content and take revenge for what happened during the day. All of you charge. It's time to kill the enemy. He raised his saber high and laughed heartily with Kagan. He followed the first echelon into the barracks of the new army. Then he bent his body slightly and chopped at the curtain of a tent. He forcefully tore a hole nearly 10 feet wide in it. However, the expected scene of the enemy sleeping soundly or panicking didn't appear. With the help of the bonfire in the camp, they saw an empty tent. Not to mention a single person, there wasn't even a blanket to be seen. This was clearly an empty military tent. There was nothing inside. Just from this point alone, it was clear that no one had lived in it. One of the tents was empty. Kagan had a bad feeling about this, but he still continued to cut down a few more tents. Reality told him that there were no opponents in any of the tents, nor were there any items. At this moment, no matter how stupid he was, he knew that this was an empty tent. In other words, he had been tricked. Not good, this is the enemy's trap. Retreat. Seeing that his hopes were dashed, Keegan felt a chill run down his spine. Keegan shouted for the army to retreat. Even if they wanted to retreat now, it was clearly too late. Because right at this moment, countless cavalry suddenly appeared in the darkness around the large tent, each of them holding fiery bows. Under the loud shout of Commander Deng Yu, round after round of fire arrows flew through the air, landing in the midst of the 5,000 cavalry under the command of the Yili army. The flaming arrows were like meteors streaking across the sky, landing on the cavalrymen. One by one the soldiers screamed, howled, fell off their horses, rolled on the ground, or galloped away aimlessly, knocking down their comrades one after another. Under the rain of fire arrows, the 5,000 cavalrymen's formation was thrown into chaos, drowning out Keegan's order to retreat. All units charge. Deng Yu pulled out his saber after firing 3 arrows in a row. With a loud shout, he led the charge towards the surrounded cavalrymen. What followed was the sound of thousands of horses galloping from each camp. One side came prepared while the other side was panicking. One side had high morale while the other side had no will to fight. This was not a fair battle to begin with. After a few charges, the 5,000 cavalrymen of the Yili army were either dead or injured. The outcome was decided. In the main camp of the Yili army, one could vaguely see the flames of the new army camp a few miles away. Vice General Wu Liji smiled as he reported the good news to General Kun Sa. General, it seems like Keegan has succeeded. Haha, I've already said that the Han cavalrymen are nothing to be afraid of. Kun Sa laughed as if everything was within his expectations. General, should we do something too? Why don't I bring a group of cavalrymen to support them? After all, there are more than 20,000 enemies. Even if it's to capture prisoners, we'll need help. Wu Liji took the opportunity to say. Obviously, he did not want to see Keegan take all the glory and steal all the credit. Kun Sa knew what he was thinking. With 5,000 cavalrymen, capturing several times the number of enemies would not be difficult. However, as a general he had to learn to be fair. Otherwise he would not be able to convince his subordinates. Kun Sa nodded and said, "All right, I'm a little worried about Keegan. How about this, I'll give you 5,000 cavalrymen. Go and help them." "Thank you, General." Wu Liji placed his right hand on his left chest and bowed. He then turned and strode away. Kun Sa, on the other hand, was humming a tune that only he could understand. He had a contented look on his face. At this time he could not help but fantasize about his bright future after this meritorious deed. He thought about how Yes Hen had said more than once that the 5-star army was not to be trifled with. However, this time he had used his actions to give the other party a slap in the face. He wanted to see what else this person had to say this time. Kun Sa, who was overjoyed, said something that made people smile. "If you don't fight, you won't know that our Yili army's cavalrymen are so powerful." Kun Sa's beautiful dream did not last long. After a quarter of an hour, Wu Liji suddenly returned from the tent. "What's wrong? You haven't set off yet?" Kun Sa was somewhat displeased that he had taken a quarter of an hour to prepare. With this kind of speed he still wants to take the credit? "General, something bad has happened. Something bad has happened. As soon as I led the army out, we ran into the main force of the 5-star army. Each of them was armed with a 3-meter-long saber and was covered in heavy armor. We were no match for them and lost." Wu Liji's face was filled with anxiety and guilt. Chapter 964. What did you say? Kun Sa slammed the wooden table in front of him, his face full of anger. What the hell is going on? How can there be the 5-star army in front of us? Weren't they heavily injured by General Keegan? I don't know. Wu Liji shook his head. This time he was not lying. He really did not know anything. As soon as the army came out, they bumped into the new army of heavy cavalry. Their equipment and combat power were not as good as the enemy's, so they were defeated in just one confrontation. How could they figure out what happened? Fortunately, Wu Liji did not need to explain anything. Scouts poured into the tent one by one. "General, we found enemies on the left side of the army." "General, we found enemies on the right side of the army." "General, we found enemies on the right side of the army." What's going on? Where did so many enemies come from? Can anyone explain to me? With a face full of anger, Kun Sa slammed the wooden table in front of him several times. The wooden table was on the verge of collapse, as if it would collapse at any time. Following this shout, the tent was so silent that even a pin drop could be heard. Obviously, no one knew how to answer this question. This result was completely different from what they had expected, and it made them unable to think for a while. But the truth would answer everything. A flaming arrow suddenly shot into the main tent and the flames rose. Soon the tent was burned to a crisp and the temperature in the main tent rose. Wuli Ji also shouted, "Not good, the 5-star army is coming. General, quickly give the order to retreat." Retreat? Yes, retreat. After a moment of shock, Kun Sa gave the order to retreat. At this moment he did not have time to think about why there were so many 5-star army in his camp. Now he only thought about how to escape and save his life. 2 red signal flares were fired into the sky. Originally, only the 5-star army had entered the barracks. However, not long after, the 5-star army appeared from all directions. They held fire arrows and set fire to the barracks one after another, causing the horses to whine incessantly. Many of the cavalrymen in the Ili army couldn't even get on their horses. They were either shot to death, burned to death, killed or captured. Fortunately it was nighttime. Kun Sa and Wuli Ji led 5,000 cavalrymen and charged in one direction. Eventually they managed to force their way out. After losing 2,000 cavalrymen, they managed to break through the encirclement of the light cavalry regiment. The light cavalry regiment had always been known for their speed. Frontal clashes on the battlefield were not their forte. In the end, Commander Ma Xiangshan could only watch the enemy retreat and sigh loudly. The massacre in the barracks was still ongoing. The results of the new army's training in the past 2 years were proven on the battlefield. They carried him out of the courtyard and threw him onto the street. It was also at this moment that Kun Sa remembered Yeshin's character. This was a man who only cared about benefits and benefits. For benefits and benefits he would even kill his own brothers at any time. Coming into contact with such a person was like asking a tiger for its skin. After being thrown out of the courtyard, Kun Sa was helped up by the soldiers waiting outside the courtyard. He then left with an angry look on his face. He left Shajing City and went straight to the rear. He had already received news that Ili's army was coming from the direction of Ili City, which was his real home. Someone told Yeshen the news of Kun Sa's departure, but he was not moved. He had to admit that he was indeed afraid of Yang Qindong from the bottom of his heart. Unless it was necessary, he did not want to make an enemy of Yang Qindong. Kun Sa, with only 3,000 cavalrymen, wanted to ally with him. He would not do such a stupid thing. What he needed to think about now was how to drive Baiming's army out of the grasslands. For example, the nearby Sambulakwan would be his next target. Sambulakwan City. Shi Wanshan, the chief of the Xian mansion who had retreated in defeat, returned here with nearly 190,000 defeated soldiers. Originally, he wanted to reorganize here and then launch a counterattack to retake Jingzhou City and Shajing City. However, he did not expect the Datong army to be defeated so quickly. He was not ready yet, and while his main force was already in front of him. Not only did they take over Jingzhou City and Shajing City, which he had abandoned, but they also threatened the safety of Sambulakwan City. In other words, even if Shi Wanshan wanted to retreat now, he had to be prepared for an attack when he left Sambulakwan City. Shi Wanshan, who was originally ambitious, felt a little sad that the war had reached this stage. He hated the officials of the imperial court, who only knew how to pursue their own interests and did not care about the overall situation. He hated the incompetence of Datong's chief of the army, Yang Hong. If he did not have such a big appetite, he would not have surrounded Chaojing City and instead thought of a way to take it down. Then he would have been able to resist the allied forces of Walla and Ili. This would have created an opportunity for him to take down Shajing City and reach the rear of Walla. At that time, the opportunity for the decisive battle would have arrived. But now the defeated army had become a fact. How difficult would it be to find the same opportunity as before? Shi Wanshan seemed to be somewhat dispirited. The expressions of the 2 deputy commanders beside him, Gu He and Ning Wenfeng, were not much better. However, the eunuch in charge, also known as the military supervisor eunuch, Deng Chong, said in his croaky voice, "Generals, the emperor has already sent someone to deliver an 800 li urgent message. He said that the court is currently sending reinforcements. This time, with Governor Shi Heng as the leader, they will assist us and send troops to the grasslands. Our current mission is to defend Sanbuji River. We have to be like a nail nailed into this place. If we dare to retreat, we will be punished according to military law." After saying this, Deng Chong could not help but let out a sigh. Although he didn't know much about military affairs, he knew how difficult it was for a lone city to defend until reinforcements arrived. In history there might be people who relied on a city and defended it for half a year or even longer. But without exception, those who defended it were all big cities with enough provisions to last them for a long time. In contrast, Sambulakwin did not have such conditions. The city walls were low, only about 20 feet high. Scaling ladders could easily be placed on top of the city walls. The provisions in the city were not sufficient, and even the water supply was not enough to satisfy the needs of the army. Under such conditions, it would be a big problem for anyone to defend it. Report. While the four of them were still hesitating about what to do next, a scout suddenly came to report that 30,000 soldiers had defeated the 5-star army. The main general, Kun Sa, only managed to escape with 3,000 soldiers. When the news came out, Shi Wanshan and the other 3 generals' expressions became even more complicated. In contrast, the 5-star army had won a great battle, but they had just suffered a great defeat. This stark contrast made them even more depressed and anxious. In the silent room, the deputy chief, Ancient River, suddenly said, "The 5-star army has fully grown. Even if we can defeat the Walla and the Ili one day, how are we going to deal with the 5-star army? Who is their opponent?" Chapter 965. Speaking of which, Gu He could be considered a valiant general. Among the 200,000 soldiers of the Shen mansion, even Shi Wanshan was slightly inferior to him. Usually he was the one who shouted the loudest, as if he didn't put the heroes of the world in his eyes. But now he actually asked this question. This was enough to show that he was a little afraid. Ancient River's words made the originally quiet room seem even quieter. Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng didn't say anything. They didn't know what to say or how to answer this question. Only Deng Chong, the eunuch, suddenly said after a moment of silence, "General Ancient, what do you mean? Could it be that you're afraid?" As a eunuch, he only had one person to back him up, and that was the emperor. Anyone who disobeyed him would become his enemy. It was only because they were on good terms that Deng Chong normally didn't dare to say such things. If it was anyone else who dared to say such things, Deng Chong probably would have already called for soldiers to arrest them. "I'm afraid? What a joke. On the battlefield, when have I not led the soldiers? I'm just talking about something we'll have to face sooner or later." Faced with Deng Chong's question, Ancient River naturally wouldn't back down. In the face of a great enemy, if there was any internal strife, the situation in the city would be even worse. As the commander, Shi Wanshan finally opened his mouth and said, all right. These are just private words. They can't be taken seriously. We should think about how to deal with the current situation and how to deal with the Walla cavalry. The emperor has already said that we can't lose Sambulachuan. Otherwise we'll be punished by military law. Since it's like this, if you don't want to die, quickly come up with a plan. It's not easy to defend. Without enough provisions, the morale of the army will fall into chaos as time goes on. Ning Wenfeng, who was famous for being a wise man, shook his head. We can have Talu think of a way to supply us with provisions. Also, this place isn't far from Dadong Prefecture. We can think of something from there. Deng Chong also suggested. After following Shi Wanshan for so long, he wasn't a complete novice when it came to military matters. He more or less had some common sense. Dadong Prefecture? Hearing this, Ning Wenfeng shook his head. Right now, their main force has retreated to the Ningxia Guard. They must be scared out of their wits. It's impossible for them to support us. I fear that they don't even have the courage to open the city gates. As for Tulu City, we can order them, but once we leave there aren't that many guards left there to begin with. It's already not bad for them to be able to defend the city. They will be able to hold on. Duke Zhongdan won't let anyone take Tulu and threaten the Han people. Shi Wanshan interjected with certainty when this topic was brought up. This was also what he was not worried about. Perhaps the emperor had also seen this point. Otherwise, he would not have ordered them to defend Sambulakwin to the death. Instead, he would have ordered them to retreat to Tulu City. Regardless of how great of a threat Yang Chendong was to all sides and how fast his power rose, there was one thing that was not wrong. He had taken care of the great Ming people, or rather, the Han people. This situation was seen by everyone. Since this was the case with his temper, there was no reason for him to allow Tulu City to be attacked. On this point, even Shi Wanshan was full of admiration for him. When it came to Yang Chendong, Ancient River interjected, Hey, do you guys think we can have someone send a letter to the Duke of Loyalty and ask them to transport supplies for us? Others might be afraid of the Walla and Ely allied forces, but the 5-star army shouldn't be afraid. Is that okay? The 5-star army doesn't have many troops in Origin City. Do they have this kind of ability? Deng Chang also heard the interest and asked. Don't think about it. It's impossible. Ning Wenfeng refuted. Afraid that the two would not believe him, he then explained, everyone is not stupid. We should be able to see the ambition of the Duke of Loyalty. In the future there will be a day when we will become enemies. Since we are enemies, it would be good if they don't step on us when we are in dire straits. How can they support us? Besides, do we have money to pay them? If I remember correctly, the Emperor still owes the Duke of Loyalty 11 million taels of silver. As Ning Wenfeng spoke, the expressions of Shi Wanshan and the others constantly changed. Especially the eunuch Deng Chang, his expression was very unsightly. After all, his master owed the other party money and was not firm in his words. He was only a small chess piece in his master's eyes. What else could he say? The four of them sat for an entire afternoon and still couldn't come up with a better idea. In the end, Shi Wanshan could only say, forget it. It's a blessing, not a curse. Let's just hand over the problem. Since the Emperor wants us to guard here, there are some things that can be solved with help. Otherwise, we can't blame anyone if we can't defend the city. By the way, I have to trouble eunuch Deng with this matter. You know the situation in the city. The army can only eat for 20 days at most. After 20 days, I'm afraid the city will collapse. This eunuch knows. I will go back and write a secret report to the Emperor. Deng Chang said seriously. This was no longer a matter of whether or not he could complete the task. It was related to his own life. He couldn't help but take it seriously. First City Young Mansion. The new army had won another great battle, killing and capturing nearly 30,000 enemies. The news of victory was sent to Yang Qindong. He just glanced at it and put it aside. This was within his expectations. If the new army couldn't defeat the enemy, then it wouldn't be called the new army. Ely underestimated the enemy, so it was only a matter of time before they were defeated. He wasn't worried. What he needed to consider now was the changing situation in front of him and what he needed to do. For example, what kind of changes would happen to the situation on the battlefield? Yang Qindong was a person who liked to take 3 steps at a time. This time, the sudden appearance of Ely's cavalry was beyond his expectation. It was also not within his plan. However, since they had appeared, of course he wouldn't be polite. That was why he ordered the new army to attack. Facts proved that they won this battle without any suspense. However, this didn't mean that there was no problem. On the contrary, what Ely would do next was a problem that he needed to consider. Only by estimating all the possibilities and making preparations could they ensure that the 5-star army would be able to face everything safely during the mission. All along, Yang Qindong had been doing this. Every battle under his command didn't seem to require much effort or danger. However, this was the result of his careful calculations and strategies. Otherwise, even if he had weapons that were a few hundred years ahead of this era, he wouldn't be able to achieve such great results in such a short time. Then the problem appeared. What would Ely do next? Would he choose to swallow this loss silently or send out a large number of troops for revenge? 4 years ago, he left Beiming's capital in the name of returning to his hometown to pay respects to his ancestors. He left to help the southern Ming Empire deal with the Yellow Bandits. Since then he had started his own journey. The only difference was that the farmers earned grain, the merchants earned money, and the politicians earned reputation. What he earned was merely a country. To build a country, it wasn't as simple as fighting and killing. Wasn't there an old saying that went, "It's easy to conquer the world, but hard to defend the world"? How to manage these territories well and use them well was the time to show one's true ability. Fortunately, with the experience of the later generations and some of the goods in the warehouse, he was able to create a lot of value. With money, it was easy to do things, and the territory he conquered was stable. But after all, his foundation was too weak, so the local management couldn't keep up with the pace of his expansion. Just like now, he could command his troops and had the ability to conquer more territory, but how to defend it had become a big problem. For example, the territory in front of him wasn't small, and it was vast but sparsely populated. Once he defeated the enemy's main cavalry, it wouldn't be difficult to occupy it. Similarly, because the territory was vast but sparsely populated, the number of civilians needed was really difficult for him. In other words, he had the ability to defeat the enemy, but he didn't have the strength to occupy the enemy. Even so, now was the time to occupy Ely, which meant that it wasn't the time to fight the enemy. Sigh, I used a lot of effort to defeat the enemy, but I can't ask for any benefits. It's really not interesting. With a sigh, Yang Qindong called Beta Persei. He wanted to send a message to the Mabe army thousands of miles away and ask them to do something. Yang Qindong was calculating. He needed time to accumulate enough strength, such as excellent management personnel after occupying a piece of land, the people who needed to move in and out, the development of this area in the future, what kind of factory to build, what kind of sunshine to point to for the people, and so on. Like him, Baiming was also calculating. In the capital of Baiming, the ministers reached a consensus at the court meeting. Sambu Lachuan must be defended. Only in this way could they give Governor Shi Heng enough time to prepare for a big battle with Walla on the grassland and win the final victory. The consensus was reached, but the situation in Sambu Lachuan was there. The city was not big, the city walls were not high, and the food and water stored inside were very limited. With such a medium-sized city, it was impossible to stop the combined forces of Walla and Nili Ali. Commander Shi is a general who can fight. The Battle of Shen Mansion and the Battle of Tulu City have proven his ability. Now he has nearly 200,000 troops in his hands. As long as the provisions can keep up, there shouldn't be a problem to defend the city. At the court meeting, Minister of War Yi Ming stood up and expressed his opinion. Yi Ming's words attracted the silent support of many other ministers. But then Minister of Works Shi Pu stood up. Minister Yi is right, but the key problem is how to guarantee the provision on time. Chapter 966. Yes. Where is Minister Jin? How are the preparations for General Shi's army of 200,000 going? Sitting on the golden dragon throne, Zhu Qiu nodded. His gaze turned toward the Minister of Appointments. Jin Lian stood in the group of officials. Hearing Dai Zong call out his name, he immediately stepped forward with a board in his hand and said, Your Majesty, the provisions have already been transported to the Shen Manor. According to what I know, a portion of the provisions will move with the army. A portion of the provisions need to be transported to the front lines once every 3 to 5 days. Based on this, most of the provisions should still be in the Shen Manor. Then send it over. Hearing that the provisions had already been prepared, Zhu Qiu's face was filled with joy. However, after saying this, he realized that the entire hall had suddenly fallen silent. It was as if there was something wrong with what he had said. Fortunately, there were some officials who were good at understanding people's hearts. Minister of Justice Su Yozhen stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, the difficulty right now is that the provisions can't be transported up. Presumably, the area around Sambu Lachuan should be filled with Yeshen's cavalry. If we send them up now, it's no different from sending sheep into a tiger's den. Yes. Zhu Qiu's face turned bright red. Although he had already been the emperor for 6 years, he had never been on the battlefield. His understanding of war was only from what he read in books. After Su Yozhen's reminder, he knew that what he had just said was a bit too hasty. His face turned red. In order to eliminate the effects of what had just happened, he thought of a way to divert everyone's attention. He looked at Shi Heng in the group of generals and said, Governor Shi, when will the newly gathered 200,000 soldiers be gathered and sent to the battlefield? Your Majesty. Shi Heng bowed and said, The gathering time will take around 15 days. After all, 200,000 people is not a small number. As for when they will be able to reach the battlefield, if they rely on their legs, it will probably take another 1.5 months to reach Sambu Lachuan. However, if I work hard, 2 months should be enough. 2 months? This answer caused the officials who were participating in the court meeting to whisper to each other and discuss spiritedly. If it really took 2 months, Sambuchuan might really fall. If that was the case, the 200,000 soldiers in the city would be devoured. This would undoubtedly be a heavy blow to Baiming's military strength. On the dragon throne, Zhu Qiu shook her head. I'm afraid 2 months won't be enough. How about this? If anyone has any way to transport the provisions to Sambu Lachuan, feel free to share it. The ministers couldn't help but shake their heads like rattle drums. To break through the formation of the Walla cavalry and transport so much grain into the city, there was only one word to describe it: difficult. After waiting for a long time, no one came forward to provide advice. This made Zhu Qiu very angry. Normally, all of them would claim to be patriotic ministers and would love to dig out their hearts for him to see. Or perhaps he was more capable than Guanzhong and Yu Yi. However, when faced with a difficult problem, all they did was shake their heads. How could Zhu Qiu not be disappointed? After a while of discussion, the hall became quiet again. It was clear that no one had thought of a better idea. Seeing the reaction of the ministers and thinking about the fiery military situation ahead, Zhu Qiu couldn't help but get angry. She slammed her hand on the dragon table and asked loudly, "My dear ministers, you are all the smartest and most capable people in the world. Don't tell me that even you don't have a better idea?" These words made the old ministers blush. However, there were some thick-skinned ones whose faces didn't change. To them, what they learned was how to govern the world and how to govern the country with benevolence and righteousness. It wasn't some military book. It had to be said that this was the so-called Confucianism. It was just a theory within a theory. The more one read, the better one could write some good articles. This was also the use of it. They could pass the imperial examinations and obtain the qualifications to become an official. Then they would slowly waste their time and accumulate experience. Finally, they would become the so-called minister who governed the country. With such people, it was no wonder that the common people lived in an abyss of suffering. The hall was still silent. Zhu Qiu's expression became more and more unsightly. He once again felt a sense of isolation and helplessness. He once again understood what it meant to regret not having enough help when it was time to use it. In the moment of silence, a voice suddenly sounded. Dressed in a second-rank official's robe, Minister of Justice Su Yozhen stepped out of his office and said, "Your Majesty, actually, if you want to transport provisions to Sambuchuan City, it isn't that troublesome. As long as one person is willing to agree, this matter is simple." Someone stepped out. This already made Zhu Qiu very happy. The person who stepped out even thought of a solution. Zhu Qiu immediately asked, "Beloved Minister Su, do you have a good idea? Quickly say it." Among the officials, the Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao, had been standing there with his eyes closed. When he saw Su Yozhen step out, his originally unconcerned expression instantly changed. His brows couldn't help but furrow together but then slowly relax. Yang Qindong had already told him that Su Yozhen was also a person of the same path. However, in these past few years, the two didn't have much contact. Perhaps it was because they didn't feel at ease with each other. They only silently cooperated with each other on some matters. If they could cooperate, they would also silently support each other in private. Hu Xiao naturally understood Su Yozhen a little. He was smart, discerning, able to see the situation clearly, and had smooth and slick methods. However, him stepping out at this time was still out of Hu Xiao's expectations. He had already guessed what this person wanted to say. However, was it really good to involve Yang Qindong in this matter? The opponent this time was the allied cavalry of the Walla cavalry and the Ili cavalry. Did the five-star army really have the strength to stop them? However, with Su Yozhen's personality, he rarely fought a battle that he wasn't confident in. Could it be that he had received Yang Qindong's secret order and wanted to take the initiative to participate in such a big event to share some benefits, or was it all his own idea? While Hu Xiao was still guessing, Su Yozhen had already stepped out. He crossed his arms and said, "Your Majesty, if you want to resolve this situation, the only way is to ask the Duke of Loyalty. There is no other way." The Duke of Loyalty? Zhu Qiu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, originally had a face full of expectation. At this moment, his expression became somewhat ugly. It was unknown when it started, but in the court of Baiming the words Duke of Loyalty had become a taboo. If it wasn't necessary, no one would mention it. Perhaps everyone knew that this person's influence was so great that it threatened the survival and development of Baiming. However, this person's influence had already reached a certain level. He was no longer someone that could be casually suppressed. Since there was no way to deal with him, it was better not to mention him. This could be considered as out of sight, out of mind. But now, Su Yozhen had broken this rule and took the initiative to mention him. An extremely clear expression of displeasure flashed across Dai Zong's face. The Duke of Loyalty? How could he have such an ability? Zhu Qiu's voice carried a trace of dissatisfaction. Listen to the sound of gongs and drums. The ability of the officials to observe people's expressions was not small. Seeing that the emperor was a bit angry, the smartest thing to do was to immediately stop this topic. However, Su Yozhen had no way out now. Ever since Yang Qindong appeared in the capital of Baiming and saw him at night, Su Yozhen, who had been wavering, knew that he had already boarded Yang Xie's ship. It was likely that it would be impossible for him to get off. The only thing he could do was to think of a way to prevent this ship from sinking in the sea and find a way to sail further. After understanding this in his heart, he took the initiative to cooperate with Yang Xie. For example, when the five-star army attacked North Korea, Many of the officials in the court criticized the five-star army for attacking a vassal state of the Ming Dynasty. This was clearly a form of disrespect to the Ming Dynasty. Not only did he not make a fuss with these people, he even privately found the Daizong emperor and said that North Korea was not part of the Ming Dynasty. Even if it was taken away, there was no real loss. It would be better to use this opportunity to ask the five-star army for some war horses. After all, strength was the way of the king. As long as he had enough strength, he could take back what he lost sooner or later. It was Su Yozhen who came up with this idea. He originally wanted to reprimand the five-star army and even the Daizong emperor who sent troops from Liaodong to support North Korea. He thought that compared to the vassal state being captured, it was more important to strengthen oneself. After all, North Korea was not the first vassal state to be captured. Zhu Qiu agreed, and Su Yozhen joined forces with some courtiers who were on good terms with him. In the end, when they finally took down the Joseon dynasty, Yang Qindong only had to pay the price of 50,000 war horses. Moreover, it wasn't for free. It was a loan to the northern Ming dynasty, which had to be converted into silver and returned in the future. Of course, he owed too much. It was hard to say whether he could pay it back, but at least he owed money in name. The five-star army actually captured North Korea in such a short period of time. This matter also made Su Yozhen have a further understanding of Yang Qindong's strength and understanding. After all, it was just some small countries in the south. It could be said that the barren land was occupied and its influence was far from being so big. Then how powerful was the five-star army? Su Yozhen had an idea. If possible, he wanted to go to the grassland's first city to take a look. He wanted to see what kind of scale Yangtze's development had reached. If he wanted to go, he needed a dignified reason. Now that Sanbuchuan was surrounded and in danger, he saw this as an opportunity. Su Yozhen stood up and spoke to the emperor. There was another reason why Su Yozhen had the courage to stand up. He believed that Yang Qindong did not want to see the 200,000 Baiming soldiers in Sanbuchuan get eaten by the grassland's foreign tribes. It was to cater to this idea that he chose to take the initiative to attack. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.